Chapter 1131. Everyone, please take a look. He flipped his hand, and a small fireball appeared in his palm. The 7 archmages looked at the small fireball in his hand with puzzled expressions. Chairman Su, is there anything special about this fireball spell? A Canla Empire archmage asked. No, there's nothing special about it. It's just an ordinary fireball spell. He shook his head. Now, can the 7 of you please summon a fireball spell each? The 7 archmages looked at each other and still raised their hands to summon a fireball. For the 8 archmages, including Su-Yi, the lowest level of fire magic like the fireball spell naturally didn't pose any difficulty. It could be said that each of them had mastered the fireball spell to the point of perfection. However, when these 8 fireballs were placed together, they were clearly different from each other. For example, the fireballs in the hands of the 4 Malar Empire archmages were about the size of a normal person's head. However, the fireballs in the hands of the 3 Canla Empire archmages were clearly smaller, and most a bit bigger than a normal person's fist. As for Su-Yi's fireball spell, it was in the middle. It wasn't as big as a person's head, nor was it as small as a fist. Apart from the size, the fireballs summoned by each archmage were also different in their luster. Some were extremely bright, some were slightly dim, some were shockingly red, and some were dark red with a hint of purple. Everyone, it's just the simplest fireball spell, but everyone summons different ones. Do you still think that the current system of magic and signs is correct? Su-Yi pointed at the fireballs in everyone's hands and asked bluntly. That's nothing, right? A Malar Empire archmage frowned slightly. Every mage's understanding of magic is different. It's normal for the spells they use to be different. But this will inevitably affect the effect of the spell, right? Su-Yi pointed at the fireball in the hands of the Malar Empire magus and said, Look, the fireball in your hand is the brightest and the reddest color. You must be after explosive power, right? The Grand Magus nodded. That's easy to see. Then do you know how you did it? Su-Yi asked again. How do you do it? The archmage looked at Su-Yi, seemingly feeling that Su-Yi's question was a bit unreasonable. I mobilized my mana and summoned the fire elemental magic, and then it naturally became like this. As for why, that's my understanding of the fireball technique. What's wrong with that? Of course not, Su-Yi said with unusual certainty. You only know how to gather magical elements to form a fireball according to your own understanding, but you don't know why it turned out like this. Don't you find it strange? The 7 Grand Magi looked at each other. What's so strange about that? Which of the mages on the signs didn't learn how to use magic like this? I'm not. Su-Yi shook his head. I have a habit. No matter what I learn, I like to thoroughly understand what's going on before I'm satisfied. Take this fireball technique, for example. Although I easily learned how to use mana to gather magical elements to form a fireball technique, I wasn't satisfied with it. Because I don't understand why it's like this. Why can the magical elements be affected by my mana and then condense? Why does the magical elements that originally didn't have any shape or special state in the surrounding space turn into a fireball after I condense them? Why does this fireball look like this? Why? Su-Yi said a string of whys in one breath, making the 7 Grand Magi dumbstruck. It was just a fireball technique. This Su-Yi actually thought of so many questions. It was really too surprising. Of course, perhaps it was because he had such a serious attitude that he was able to become a Grand Magi in his early 40s. In the beginning, I didn't have a way to understand these questions. But after establishing the Shinfei Merchant Guild, our guild gathered mages of different levels from different places. After many years of research, I finally understood a little bit of what this so-called magic is. What is it? A Canla Empire Grand Magi couldn't help but ask. Look carefully. Su-Yi indicated for everyone to look at the fireball technique in his hand. Then, with a thought, the magic in his body circulated. The fireball in his hand, which was originally about the size of a fist and a head, suddenly grew in size. In an instant, it became much bigger than the fireball in the hands of the 4 Malar Empire Grand Magi. The expressions of the other 7 Grand Magi didn't change. Although it was a bit difficult to increase the size of a spell that had already been formed, it wasn't much for a Grand Magi. Just as this thought appeared in their minds, the fireball in Su Yi's hand suddenly shrunk, becoming very small in an instant. It was much smaller than a normal person's fist and was only a bit bigger than the tip of a finger. This time, the other 7 Grand Magi couldn't help but reveal shocked expressions. It wasn't difficult to make a normal fireball technique bigger, but to make it suddenly smaller wasn't so easy. There were only 2 ways to make a spell that had already been formed suddenly smaller. The first was to compress the magical elements contained within the spell to a high degree, and thus shrink the appearance of the spell. This was very difficult for normal mages, but it wasn't much of a problem for Grand Magi. However, this kind of highly compressed spell would become very unstable due to the high amount of magical elements contained within it. It was very easy for it to go out of control. Moreover, the appearance of the spell would definitely undergo an obvious change because of this. However, they could clearly see that apart from the fact that the fireball in Su Yi's hand had shrunk quite a bit, it was still the same color as before. It looked like it had only shrunk in an ordinary way, and nothing else had changed. This meant that although the fireball in Su Yi's hand had shrunk, the density of the magical elements hadn't increased by a large amount. It was as if the outer layers of the fireball had been shaved off. To do this, it was only possible to disperse the condensed magical elements outside the fireball under extremely precise control. At the same time, one had to ensure that the magical elements in the center didn't dissipate as well. This was undoubtedly an extremely difficult method. Even Grand Magi wouldn't be able to do it easily if they hadn't practiced for a long time. This Sui can't be that bored, can he? The other 7 Grand Magi looked at Su Yi with faces full of doubt. Very quickly, Su Yi's following actions caused their doubt to turn into shock. The small fireball in Su Yi's hand, that was only a bit bigger than a thumb, remained there for around 5 seconds before it suddenly began to grow at a speed visible to the naked eye. Bit by bit, it slowly became bigger, just like a balloon being blown up. When the fireball was already 3 times the size of a normal person's head, everyone suddenly felt the magical undulations released by Su Yi change. The enormous fireball suddenly disappeared and was replaced by an enormous ball of water. The 7 Grand Magi looked at the enormous ball of water in shock, almost not daring to believe their eyes. In theory, changing the fireball into a ball of water could be done by first dispelling the fireball and then instantly summoning a new ball of water. But the 7 of them had been staring at Su Yi the entire time, so they didn't notice this process at all. The fireball had turned into a ball of water, and it was like the fire elemental magic inside had turned into water elemental magic. How had he done it? Without waiting for them to ask, the magical undulations released by Su Yi changed again, and the ball of water disappeared in an instant, turning into a tornado that spun at high speed above Su Yi's palm. The 7 Grand Magi stared blankly as the tornado turned into an enormous spherical rock. In the following period of time, the magic in Su Yi's palm switched back and forth between 4 different types of elemental magic. Its shape was also constantly changing, sometimes becoming round, sometimes becoming square. The 7 Grand Magi were dazzled. After a while, one of the Malar Empire's Grand Magi suddenly raised his hand. "Stop! Chairman Su, what are you doing?" The other 6 Grand Magi also looked at Su Yi with questioning eyes. They believed that Su Yi wouldn't be so bored as to specially practice this kind of magic to show them. After all, no matter what, Su Yi was an archmage. How could he play such a childish trick? Su Yi smiled and put down his hand. The magic also disappeared. I just want to tell you that the so-called magic is indeed a method of using magic to make the magical elements manifest in various forms. However, magic doesn't actually have any form of differentiation. The ancient method of differentiation between the 4 types of elemental magic is even more meaningless. Because the magical elements themselves don't have any attributes, magic also doesn't have any attributes. The reason why they manifest different forms is only because the magical elements, as energy particles, are affected by different frequencies of resonance and manifest different forms. The other 7 Grand Magi stared blankly at Su Yi. This guy was starting to talk about things they didn't understand at all. He didn't care about their reactions and continued. So in summary, the so-called magicians just happen to have this kind of mental energy. So they can use the vibrations of their mental energy to influence the elemental magic particles to form magic. In fact, as long as you find a suitable method, even if you're not a mage, you can still influence the magical elements and control them to form magic. Magic arrays are a very obvious example. Speaking of magic arrays, the 7 Grand Magi recovered. Chairman Sue, don't the various magic machines of New Flyer and these military magic machines all rely on magic arrays? That's right. He smiled and nodded. But our New Flyer's research on magic arrays is different from other mages. For us, magic arrays are used to control the magical elements and form magic effects. In theory, it's similar to the magic arrays that most mages research, but in reality, our Chamber of Commerce's research on magic arrays is more detailed, more thorough, and more scientific. Chapter 1132. Su Yi's words flowed like a river. He spoke to the 7 archmages for half an hour, but they still couldn't understand what he meant by using scientific concepts to view magic. He was very helpless about this. These 7 archmages had lived in the signs since they were young. They weren't like the children on Earth who paid attention to establishing scientific concepts from a young age. Naturally, they didn't have any understanding of science. Moreover, they'd studied and researched magic under traditional concepts for decades. It was normal for them to be less receptive to new concepts than the children who just entered the New Flight College. He didn't plan on letting them truly understand this concept in such a short time. The reason he spent so much time explaining these things to the 7 archmages was to let them recognize a fact. The fact was that the traditional concept of magic was outdated. All the mages from the 2 empires, including the archmages, had no ability to stop New Flyer. Although the 7 archmages were still somewhat unwilling to accept this, they had to admit that Yi was right. This was the truth. Actually, if it was possible, I wouldn't want to fight this war. Yi said with a sincere expression. The destruction brought about by war is too terrifying. In my opinion, it's meaningless. However, if we don't go through war, New Flyer and I will encounter many obstacles. For example, if we don't go through this war, I think it'll be very difficult for me to have the opportunity to speak with all of you on equal terms. No, with your status as an archmage, you'll definitely have the opportunity to speak with us on equal terms. The archmage from the Kamla Empire who'd had deep conversations with Archmage Raduca and Archmage Aphelion sighed and shook his head. But if it wasn't for this war and the strength that New Flyer displayed, you definitely wouldn't have been able to convince us of your words. Actually, I don't really believe it even now. Another archmage from the Malar Empire said with a sullen expression. Chairman Su, I admit that the concepts you brought up are very novel, but I still have my doubts until there's enough evidence to prove it. He shrugged, indicating that he didn't care. He didn't have to make them believe him, as long as he could pique their interest. A brand new set of magic theories based on scientific research, if they wanted to spread it on the science continent. They couldn't leave the participation of these archmagi. He needed not only their rich knowledge of magic, but also their high reputation in the circle of magicians. As long as the archmages at the apex of magic were interested in this new theory and personally invested themselves in the research, they would definitely lead the other mages of the signs to join in as well. All right, Chairman Su. I admit that we can't deal with your magic airships, so the army below doesn't have any hope of winning this battle. That Kamla Empire Archmagus gave another sigh. But if you want us to admit defeat, I'm afraid that's unrealistic. This is the final battle for the glory of our Kamla Empire. We can lose, but we cannot surrender. Is that so? He smiled, revealing a slightly strange smile. The reason why you feel that it's impossible to surrender is because the blow to you isn't big enough, right? That Kamla Empire Archmagus gave a bitter laugh. He didn't refute it, but he also didn't admit it. He looked at the 2 armies that had stopped fighting and made a hand gesture to the 7 archmagi, telling them to wait. Then he flew to the front of the Kamla Empire's formation. Marshal Sudiman, can you come out and talk? Marshal Sudiman, in the middle of the formation, looked at Su-yi in the distance for a while before raising the belly of his warhorse. Ignoring the generals around him, he walked out of the formation. The dense crowd of Kamla Empire soldiers opened a path, and Marshal Sudiman quickly arrived in front of Su-yi. Seeing Marshal Sudiman jump off his horse, Su-yi revealed a faint smile. Lord Marshal, we meet again. Marshal Sudiman narrowed his eyes and seriously looked at Su-yi for a while before giving a cold snort. It's a pity that I wasn't able to kill you last time. Let's not talk about the past. Su-yi waved his hand. Lord Marshal, I'm sure you know the current situation very well. I don't want this battle to continue because it's meaningless. What do you think? What? Are you here to persuade me to surrender? Marshal Sudiman's eyes were cold as he said in a muffled voice, Su-yi, let me tell you, even if all the soldiers of the Kamla Empire die in this battle, we will never surrender to you. If you want to end this battle, then use your fists to do the talking. Su-yi couldn't help but shake his head. From Marshal Sudiman's point of view, he obviously wouldn't choose to surrender directly. Marshal Sudiman was the commander of the Kamla Empire's military and the highest representative of the Kamla Empire's military. Now, he was leading the most elite troops of the Kamla Empire. If he chose to surrender now, it would almost mean the complete surrender of the Kamla Empire. This was obviously not something that Marshal Sudiman could decide. Naturally, he couldn't accept it. All right, you want me to use my fists to do the talking, right? I'll show you my fists. Su-yi sighed and took out a small magic communicator from his pocket. Rockwell, according to the original plan, test the magic particle beam cannon. Marshal Sudiman looked at Su-yi with a strange expression. What the hell was the magic particle beam cannon? Could it be that this was the fist that Su-yi said he would show him? Lord Marshal, raise your head. What you're about to see will definitely leave an indelible impression on you. Hearing Su-yi's words, Marshal Sudiman looked into the sky and saw 10 magic airships flying out of the magic airship fleet. They gathered in the sky to the west of the battlefield and formed a circle. This unusual action immediately attracted the attention of everyone on the battlefield. Everyone raised their heads and looked over curiously. After the 10 magic airships formed a formation in the sky, there was a dazzling white light that appeared in front of them before they collided in the center of the circle. The expressions of the 7 archmagi floating in the sky all changed at the same time. They could feel that the white light released by the 10 magic airships had a strange magic fluctuation. It was different from the magic fluctuations they knew of before. Thinking of how Su-yi had told them that the magic fluctuations were the vibrations of the magic elemental energy, the different vibrations represented the different forms of the magic elemental energy. If the magic fluctuations released by the white light were this special, the magic released in the end would be very special as well. As soon as this thought appeared in their minds, their expressions changed again. This time, it wasn't just the 7 archmages. Even the 16 great mages on the other side of the sky, as well as the other mages of the 2 empires below, all changed their expressions at the same time. All the mages could clearly sense that at the center of the circle where the 10 white light beams converged, the mana waves became clearer and more intense. In the blink of an eye, it had exceeded the range of mana waves caused by ordinary magic. However, even when the intensity of the mana fluctuations had reached the level of a forbidden spell, they still didn't stop. Instead, they continued to increase at an even faster speed. The magic elemental energy in the surrounding magic space wildly gathered at the center of the 10 white light beams, and in the blink of an eye, the magic space in a radius of over 1,000 meters was completely sucked clean. Initially, the 10 rays of white light gathered in the center of the circle to form a very bright white ball. As more and more magical elements were absorbed, the white ball grew bigger and bigger. It gradually turned from a faint white color to a deathly white color, and then became faintly discernible with traces of black stripes inside. The 7 archmagi, who fell back to the ground because they didn't want to be affected, looked at the white ball with serious expressions. They could easily feel how shocking the amount of magic elemental energy inside the white ball was. Once this white ball exploded, its might would be very terrifying. Even if it was a forbidden spell, its might would be far from comparable. When two of the Archmagi turned to look at Su Yi standing in front of the Kanla Empire's army, they suddenly felt that something was strange. When they turned their heads, they saw that the white ball in the sky had already shot out and turned into a blinding white light that stole all the sunlight in the sky. It flew towards a mountain range in the west of the battlefield. The speed of the white light was very shocking. It had already reached the mountain range in the instant it shot out. Everyone was dumbstruck as they watched the white light gather the mountain range and then explode into an abnormally bright and dazzling light that completely covered the sun. Everyone was forced to close their eyes tightly. Some people couldn't react in time and were instantly blinded by this incomparably dazzling white light. Tears involuntarily flowed down their faces. A moment later, a terrifying muffled sound, as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting, came from the west along with the tremors under their feet. The tremors made everyone's legs go weak, and many people even fell to the ground. After a few minutes, the sound gradually faded and the tremors under their feet also slowly subsided. Everyone opened their eyes with difficulty and looked at the mountain range in the west. However, there was no longer any mountain range. As far as everyone's eyes could see, the mountain range in the west had actually been split in two. The left side extended towards the south, while the right side extended towards the northeast. However, in the middle, a huge flat gap had suddenly appeared. The most famous Tangula mountain range in the center of the Kanla Empire had actually been blown apart. Su Yi turned his head and smiled at the dumbfounded Marshal Sudirman. "Lord Marshal, is this fist big enough?" Chapter 1133. On the first day of the 11th month, when the chill of early winter descended on most of the signs, a piece of news spread across the entire continent. The Kanla Empire, the New Flyer, and the Kingdom of Ruhr had negotiated for half a month and finally signed a ceasefire agreement. When this news spread out, it didn't shock many people. Ever since half a month ago, the Kanla Empire and the Malar Empire lost to the Kingdom of Ruhr on the Sarah Plains. This result was already set in stone. It could be said that this result was the best result for the Kanla Empire. This was because if the New Flyer didn't plan to stop the war and continue to attack the Kanla Empire with the Kingdom of Ruhr, then the Kanla Empire wouldn't have any ability to stop them. If the Kingdom of Ruhr and the New Flyer were even more ruthless, it was very likely that the Kanla Empire would be torn apart or even destroyed. No one believed that the Kingdom of Ruhr and the New Flyer had the ability to completely conquer the Kanla Empire, but no one doubted their ability. Therefore, when the news of the ceasefire agreement spread out, most people's first reaction was to let out a sigh of relief. Since there was a conflict between the two sides at the beginning of last year and the war before signing the armistice at the end of this year, even if the war only lasted for a year and a half, it affected countless countries and most of the people on the Signs continent. Because of the war, the lives of many people in the Signs were severely affected. The most obvious example was that, because of the war, the countries in the southwest corner of the continent that were under the New Flyers faction suffered a severe blow to their foreign trade. Although this had the greatest impact on these countries, it also had a great impact on the countries that traded with them. For example, because these few countries had already popularized agricultural magic machines and used the special fertilizer of the elves, their grain production was extremely high. Therefore, they were able to export large amounts of grain at a low price. Many countries relied on these few countries to export grain to them. In the end, because of the war in these 2 years, these few countries' grain exports were also affected, and there were even situations of famine in a few countries. Now that the New Flyer and the Kanla Empire had finally signed the ceasefire agreement, the merchants who couldn't hold back for a long time had already reorganized their trade routes. An unending stream of grain was instantly sent on the way, quickly alleviating the famine in these few countries. Of course, this was only a small part of the effects after the ceasefire agreement was signed. What people were concerned about was the specific conditions in this ceasefire agreement. Logically speaking, the Kingdom of Ruhr and the New Flyer had clearly won and forced the Kanla Empire to sign the ceasefire agreement. Therefore, this ceasefire agreement should be extremely beneficial to the Kingdom of Ruhr and the New Flyer. However, considering that the Kanla Empire was an old empire with a history of nearly 1,000 years, even if the Kingdom of Ruhr and the New Flyer obtained an advantage on the battlefield with their military magic machines, it would be very difficult for them to force the Kanla Empire to sign such a ridiculous agreement. Therefore, people were very curious about the contents of the agreement. The Kingdom of Ruhr was fine. After all, the war in the Signs wasn't the first or second time. The ceasefire agreement between the two countries wasn't much of a big deal. What people were really curious about was that a chamber of commerce like the New Flyer was able to sign a ceasefire agreement with a huge empire like the Kanla Empire. This was the first time in the history of Signs. Moreover, the New Flyer was only a chamber of commerce in the end. It wasn't like the Kingdom of Ruhr, who had a lot of requirements that could be guessed. What kind of conditions would it propose? However, no matter if it was the New Flyer or the Kanla Empire, they didn't talk about the ceasefire agreement. They didn't reveal the specific conditions at all. However, after signing the ceasefire agreement, the Kingdom of Ruhr and the New Flyer quickly withdrew from the Kanla Empire's territory. Presumably, the conditions that the Kanla Empire agreed to should have satisfied the Kingdom of Ruhr and the New Flyer. Otherwise, they wouldn't have withdrawn so quickly. However, for the Kanla Empire, signing the ceasefire agreement was only the beginning. Because of the continuous victories of the Kingdom of Ruhr and the Kanla Empire, even without the influence of the Kingdom of Ruhr and the Kingdom of Ruhr, it was already in chaos. Not to mention, just the dozen provinces that declared independence were enough to make the Kanla Empire's royal family anxious. Although the Kingdom of Ruhr and the Kingdom of Ruhr retreated, it wasn't that easy to stabilize the chaotic situation in the Kanla Empire. Most people felt that even if the Malar Empire didn't stab the Kanla Empire in the back at this time, the Kanla Empire would have to spend a lot of effort to stabilize the chaotic situation in the country. On November 9th, the Malar Empire, the Lampari Kingdom, and the Drake Duchy announced to the public that the two sides signed a ceasefire agreement. This meant that after the Kanla Empire was forced to sign the ceasefire agreement, the other pillar of the two empires, the Malar Empire, was also forced to announce the end of the war. Although it was slightly different from the Kanla Empire that was forced to sign the ceasefire agreement, everyone could see that the Malar Empire obviously paid a huge price. After all, in the battle on the Sela Plain, the Malar Empire also sent a large number of reinforcements to fight against the Kingdom of Ruhr and the Kanla Empire, but they suffered a crushing defeat together. Obviously, the Malar Empire also realized that they couldn't fight against the army that had the support of the New Flyer military magic machines. Therefore, instead of being completely defeated like the Kanla Empire, or even being only one step away from breaking into the capital, it was better to recognize the situation in advance and pay a sufficient price to stop the war. As for the specific content of the ceasefire agreement, the Malar Empire, the Lampari Kingdom, and the Drake Duchy did not announce it. However, it was still possible to see some clues from the subsequent measures taken to deal with the situation. The most obvious example was the Frankish kingdom's government in exile that had been sheltered by the Malar Empire announced the dissolution of the Frankish kingdom. At the same time, the Sac kingdom's emperor, who had been doing all kinds of things with the support of the Marlow Empire, also disappeared without a trace. This meant that the Sac kingdom had disappeared from history. As for the Lampari Kingdom and the Drake Duchy, according to the agreement they had signed, they divided the territory of the Sac Kingdom and the Frankish Kingdom. Of course, the Lampari Kingdom took most of it, which was almost all of the Sac Kingdom and most of the Frankish Kingdom. The Drake Duchy only took less than 20,000 square kilometers of the Sac Kingdom and less than half of the Frankish Kingdom's territory. Like this, the Lampari Kingdom's territory had doubled. It had gone from a normal kingdom in the southwest corner of the continent to a superpower that was second only to the two empires. The Drake Duchy's territory had expanded even more. It had gone from a small duchy of less than 10,000 square kilometers to a large country of over 200,000 square kilometers. With such a large country, of course it couldn't be considered a small duchy. On the 17th of the 11th month, during the Drake Duchy's annual founding celebration, Archduchess Caroline announced that she had ascended to the throne, becoming the first queen of the Drake Duchy. From this day forth, the Drake Duchy had become the Drake Kingdom. As for the Lampari Kingdom, they didn't have such an obvious event. They just absorbed large amounts of new territory and encouraged the merchants of the Lampari Kingdom to invest in the new territory. The Lampari Kingdom had always done these things before, but because they were in different countries, they were restricted. Now that the Sac Kingdom and the Frankish Kingdom no longer existed, the hindrance had disappeared, so the Lampari Kingdom's actions naturally became faster. On the 23rd of the 11th month, the Wales Duchy, with the help of the New Flyers Guards, broke through the Drow Kingdom's royal city, Drow City. King Wark had died in the battle to defend the royal palace, and Drow City had fallen, announcing the end of the Drow Kingdom. On the same day, the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom that had been silently defending suddenly launched a full-scale counterattack. The Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom's army that had received large amounts of military magic machines from the New Flyer used less than half a month to win 13 battles, repelling all the enemies that had besieged them. After that, the Southeast Signs responded to the call of the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom and signed the Southeast Signs Trade Treaty, which was referred to as the Southeast Treaty. According to the contents of the Southeast Treaty, the 13 companies under the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom would have full trading rights in the Southeast countries. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that with the powerful business ability of the 13 companies of the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom, as well as the powerful magic machine industry they had obtained after cooperating with the New Flyer, once they obtained full trading rights, the entire southeast corner of the continent would belong to these 13 companies. However, the situation was stronger than people. Even if the Southeast countries weren't willing to sign this treaty, they couldn't do anything. On the 29th of the 11th month, the Mana Magic Kingdom announced that they had signed a ceasefire agreement with the New Flyer. Like this, the war between the two empires and the New Flyer that had lasted a year and a half, almost affecting the entire Signs, had finally come to an end. In the history of the Signs, a war that affected such a wide range only took a year and a half to end. This was the first time. In history, there had been an all-out war between the two empires that lasted a full 23 years. Of course, everyone understood that the reason why it ended so quickly was because the military magic machines of the New Flyer were too powerful. There was no suspense at all on the battlefield. Then, the other countries that participated in the war had already announced their results. What was the New Flyer doing? Chapter 1134. At the very least, in the 2 to 3 months after the two empires signed the armistice agreement, New Flyer didn't seem to have done anything. Although after the war ended, the Frestac Chamber of Commerce had been working hard to rebuild the Frestac Chamber of Commerce's large organizations that had been closed because of the war. To most people, these things were trivial matters that couldn't be considered important at all. No one would believe that New Flyer had taken such a huge risk and didn't hesitate to go to war with the two empires only to restore everything to its original state after winning the war. However, New Flyer really didn't do anything and continued to follow its plan to restore bit by bit. However, people also easily discovered that New Flyer's restored strongholds were obviously much more important than before. Not to mention the small empires. Even in huge empires like the Kamla Empire and the Malar Empire, New Flyers organizations would receive all kinds of preferential treatment from the local officials. In fact, most of the time, New Flyers organizations would receive better treatment than the merchants of the two empires. Of course, this was the benefit that New Flyer had obtained from this war. However, to many people, this was still far from enough. Look, the Lampari Kingdom and the Drake Duchy had obtained a large area of valuable territory and stabilized the situation. Although the Kingdom of Ruhr didn't obtain a large area of territory, it had taken the territory that belonged to the Norton Duchy into its arms. Apart from that, It had also obtained a huge amount of compensation from the Kanla Empire, which totaled more than 200 million gold coins, as well as other immeasurable benefits. Although New Flyer was a merchant guild and theoretically shouldn't have any desire for territory, New Flyer was undoubtedly the protagonist of this war. Whether it was the Lampari Kingdom, the Drake Duchy, or the Kingdom of Ruhr, the main reason why they were able to defeat the two empires was because they had obtained the support of New Flyer. Since that was the case, New Flyer should have obtained the greatest benefits. Therefore, many people were puzzled by the fact that New Flyer hadn't done anything for such a long time because it didn't make sense at all. Is it really that hard to understand? Sui shrugged and revealed a relaxed smile. For our Chamber of Commerce, returning everything to normal is the greatest benefit. Look, because of this war, our Chamber of Commerce has invested close to 300 million gold coins. This doesn't even include the huge profits we've lost in the past 2 years due to the severe impact of the war. All in all, we've lost at least 200 million gold coins. Therefore, it is in our best interest to return everything to an orderly state. 70 slightly knit her brows and looked at Sui for a while before shaking her head with a sigh. I believe that's what you really think. But Sui, I'm afraid this isn't what everyone in your Chamber of Commerce wants. So if you say that your Chamber of Commerce doesn't intend to gain any benefits from this, I won't believe you even with a single finger. It's fine if you don't believe me. Could it be that you want me to explain it to you one by one? Sui smiled and decided to throw away this question. If we're talking about benefits, based on the surface, most people would think that your Lampari Kingdom would gain the most. Then, as the Queen of the Lampari Kingdom, what do you think? 70 revealed a bitter smile. All right, stop teasing me. It's not like you don't know how busy I've been recently. Being able to see you today is already all the time I've spent. That means I'm bothering you? Sui laughed and turned to leave, but 70 came forward to grab him. Stop joking. 70 reprimanded him. 70 reprimanded him. You should know what I want to discuss with you. Seeing the tiredness that couldn't be hidden in 70's eyes, Sui gave a sigh before saying with a nod, All right, I won't joke around. 70, you should be worried about how to digest the large amount of territory you obtained from the Sac Kingdom and the Frankish Kingdom, right? Accurately speaking, it's how to digest the people of these territories. 70 tightly knit her brows. 70 knitted her brows. Although obtaining large amounts of territory is a good thing, and countless people in the kingdom call me the greatest king in history, those fellows don't know how hard it is to turn the people in these territories into our Lampari Kingdom citizens. I don't think it's that hard, Sui said with a relaxed smile. To be honest, I've investigated countless countries in the signs, and I've found a characteristic that all the countries have. It is that no matter which country's citizens, they don't have a sense of belonging or loyalty to their country. 70 looked at Sui for a while with a strange look. Isn't this natural? It can't be that you only notice this now, right? Sui's expression froze. He thought that this was the conclusion that he had come to after observing for so many years, but he never thought that 70 would say natural. Hey, as a king, you actually think that it's natural for your citizens to not have loyalty to you? Of course. The citizens will only be loyal to their own territories, to the country. There's no meaning in being loyal, so why would they do this? Sui understood that 70 had confused the loyalty he mentioned with the loyalty to the territory that was popular in the signs. But to be honest, 70's words weren't wrong. Perhaps it was because of this tradition in the signs that the citizens of the continent didn't have any loyalty to their country. When Sui studied the history of the signs, he found that under the 3,000 years of human rule, there had been countless changes in the history of the signs. There had been countless wars, but there had never been a war led by the citizens. Strictly speaking, the rise and fall of the countries in the signs didn't seem to be related to the citizens at all. It was completely a game between the nobles. If it was always like this, how could the citizens have a sense of belonging and loyalty to their country? But there was an advantage to this. It was that when a country took over another country's territory, they didn't need to spend that much effort to change their minds and make them recognize the new country. So, isn't this a very simple matter? You just need to let the new citizens live in peace and make sure everyone has food to eat, a house to live in, and clothes to wear. I think that these citizens won't cause you any trouble. Su-yi said with an indifferent look. You make it sound simple. 70 looked at Su-yi, not mentioning anything else. Just making sure everyone has food to eat is already very hard, all right? Is this very hard? So he was a bit confused. Take out your experience in promoting the agricultural magic machines and just promote it like that. These things were very popular in the Sac Kingdom and the Frankish Kingdom before, so there's no reason why it can't be done after being ruled by your Lampari Kingdom. This is the problem. 70 shook her head. 70 shook her head. Before, it was only your new flyer selling agricultural magic machines to the Sac Kingdom and the Frankish Kingdom, so they could only take what you sold them. Even if the agricultural magic machines you sell them are a bit lower grade than the ones from our Lampuri Kingdom, it's fine if the models are older and the functions are worse. They won't complain. Even if they did, it would be for your new flyer. Now that they have become citizens of the Lampari Kingdom, they want to be treated the same as your Lampari Kingdom citizens and want to receive the same agricultural magic machines. Su-yi took over the topic to ask. That is only one of them. Other than the agricultural magic machines, the citizens of the new territory also want fertilizer, household magic machines, and maintenance services. 70 spread her hands. 70 spread her hands. I want to agree to these things, but even if I say it doesn't count, they won't believe that I don't count. Seeing the helpless look on 70's face, Su-yi couldn't help revealing a smile. So now you want to get these things from me that you can call shots? Yes. 70 gave a generous nod to admit it. After knowing Su-yi for this long, she was very clear on how to talk to Su-yi. Most of the time, Su-yi liked being direct. Then what do you want? Su-yi asked. 70 turned to take a document from the table that she had clearly prepared for Su-yi. It's all on here. Su-yi took the document and looked it over before opening his mouth in surprise. 70, your appetite isn't small. You actually want to take all these things from me at once? Not mentioning anything else, you even want the technology for the production magic machines. You should know that our company has never transferred this technology before. It hasn't been transferred before, but that doesn't mean it won't be transferred in the future. 70 said with a serious look. Su-yi, your dream is to spread the magic machine industry across the signs, so the technology for the production magic machines can't always be monopolized by your new flyer family. Otherwise, the other countries and companies of the continent can only make the simplest household magic machines, which can't be called developing the magic machine industry at all. So other than the household magic machine technology, you have to transfer the other technology sooner or later. Your words are very reasonable. Su-yi nodded with a faint smile. But why do you think that your Lampari Kingdom will be the first to be transferred by me? If I said that it was because of our good relationship, would you believe me? 70 asked with a smile. Su-yi shook his head with a smile. You aren't that stupid of a person. So I'm relying on our Lampari Kingdom's rather complete magic machine industry foundation, as well as our experience in making magic machines that surpasses other countries, as well as our good cooperation with your new flyer over the years. How about it? Is this enough? Su-yi looked at the document in his hand before looking at 70's serious eyes and revealing a faint smile. It seems like it's time to turn a new page in the history of the signs magic machine industry. Chapter 1135. The new year of year 3804 had already passed, and when people thought that the new flyer wouldn't make any big moves and gradually turn their eyes away from the new flyer, there was a piece of news related to the new flyer that shocked all the signs. The second was the 17th. The new flyer revealed in the Shinfei Magic Machine Industry Weekly that the new flyer was currently discussing the idea of releasing all kinds of magic machine technology other than the household magic machines to organizations other than the new flyer. This news attracted the attention of countless people. Before this, the Frestec Chamber of Commerce only sold most of the household magic machine technology. As for the other magic machines, they only cooperated with the military magic machines of the countries they worked with the most. Other than that, they didn't release any other technology at all. Now that the New Flyer had revealed this news through their official magazine, of course it would attract a large amount of attention. After 2 weeks of Shinfei Magic Machine Industry Weekly mentioning this matter, on the 4th of March, the New Flyer suddenly held a press conference in Shinfei City. They officially announced that they would be releasing a large amount of production magic machine technology, as well as some other magic machine technology from the New Flyer. This news spread through the signs like it had wings. In just a single week, countless countries, companies, and other unknown organizations came to Shinfei City and the New Flyer. The New Flyer had made a list of the various magic machine technology they were about to release and had a price for each piece of technology. Each piece of technology wasn't cheap. For example, the tool manufacturing process for the semi-automatic magic lathe was priced at 340,000 gold coins. For example, the blueprint for the wind magic engine was priced at 630,000 gold coins. And for example, it had to be said this price was a bit too high. There were many people who complained that the New Flyer was simply robbing them. However, complaints were just complaints. The technology New Flyer released with great difficulty still had countless people scrambling for it. In just a week after the Frestech Chamber of Commerce's press conference, the Frestech Chamber of Commerce had signed a total of 376 technology transfer contracts, which reached a total of 264 million gold coins. Of course, except for national organizations like the Malar Empire, the Kamla Empire, and the Lampari Kingdom, and the Chimera Chamber of Commerce, which was even wealthier than the New Flyer, there were not many organizations that could swallow all the technological information at once. Due to financial constraints, many countries and non-governmental organizations had no choice but to carefully select a portion of the technology to purchase. It was obvious that they intended to specialize in one or a few fields related to magic machines. The New Flyer supported this choice and even made several technology bundling packages, which were bundling the related magic machine technology together for sale. There would be some discounts if one bought them. These benefits weren't just in terms of price. The Frestech Chamber of Commerce would also provide technical support and follow-up services for the customers who bought these technology bundle packages, guaranteeing that it would be easier for these customers to absorb these technologies. These services weren't provided to customers who bought a single piece of technology. So because of the preferential policies of the New Flyer, as well as the considerations of the various countries and organizations, these technology bundling packages were very popular. Of the 376 technology transfer agreements, over half of them were for the purchase of these technology bundling packages. Of course, there were also people who questioned the New Flyer's approach. The people who questioned the New Flyer's technology bundling packages actually put a lot of technology information that didn't have much value. It seemed that the technology bundling packages were very attractive with the discounts, but in reality, buying the technology bundling packages was a loss because they were buying technology that wasn't very useful to them. In response to this question, the New Flyer's reply was very simple. New Flyer's business practices are based on the spirit of free trade and mutual exchange. There are no coercive measures. If you're dissatisfied or have doubts about the sales strategy of New Flyer, feel free to raise them. New Flyer will listen carefully to your suggestions. At the same time, customers have the right to choose not to buy. This paragraph was a bit troublesome to say, and it sounded like it was the case, but it was actually just 6 words. If you want to buy, buy. If you don't, get out. This attitude naturally caused a lot of people to be dissatisfied, but this kind of dissatisfaction would only appear in their hearts for a short period of time before it was thrown to the back of their minds. In such a crucial period, who would have the time to vent their dissatisfaction with a New Flyer? Hurrying to buy technology information was the right thing to do. In the end, no matter how arrogant the New Flyer was, no matter how much they bullied their customers, no matter how much people cursed them in their hearts, they were still the New Flyer. They were the only chamber of commerce that had so many magic machine-related technologies. If they wanted to obtain new technology, they had no other choice. Moreover, the New Flyer wasn't just an ordinary chamber of commerce. It was a powerful organization that defeated the Kamla Empire and the Malar Empire, forcing the two empires to sign a ceasefire agreement. Even the two empires couldn't do anything to the new flyer, so other people and organizations didn't dare to complain. From the sales of these technology information, one could see some future trends. Powerful organizations like the two empires and the Chimera Chamber of Commerce naturally hope to grasp enough magic machine-related technologies like the new flyer and then work hard to create a complete magic machine industrial system that belonged to them. They would try their best to not be restricted by the new flyer. As for the other weaker countries and chambers of commerce, they naturally knew that even if they had such ambitions, they didn't have enough ability. Therefore, they would focus on a few types of magic machines, or even just one type of magic machine, and do their best to develop this type of magic machine to the extreme. Of course, this was the result of the new flyer's deliberate guidance. Therefore, in the future, there was no doubt that the magic machine industrial system would develop by leaps and bounds. This was because the new flyer had defeated the two empires to tell everyone that if they didn't pay attention to the development of the magic machine industrial system, they would definitely be eliminated. However, the direction of development would obviously be different. Some would be large and comprehensive, while some would be specialized and refined. This would gradually become similar to the modern industrial system on Earth, which was the result that Sue-E wanted to see the most. Of course, Sue-E being satisfied meant that there were many people who weren't satisfied. Chairman Sue, as for these three magic machine-related technologies, our Kanla Empire has already applied to you 3 times, hoping to buy them out. Why aren't you willing to agree? The Kanla Empire's commerce minister, who could be considered an old acquaintance of Sue-E, Descartes Marquis knit his brows as he looked at the list in his hand, looking very dissatisfied. You've always said that you hope that the magic machine industrial system can develop in the signs, so you generously transferred the magic machine technology that your new flyer has. But even if you want to transfer it, isn't it best to choose a target first? Descartes Marquis is right. The Malar Empire representative on the side, the Malar Empire's foreign trade, Minister Shans Marquis also knit his brows. The power of our two empires is without a doubt stronger than those small countries and unknown organizations. If you transfer this technology to us, you will definitely obtain better results and development prospects. So why aren't you willing? The two of you, I didn't say that I wouldn't transfer it to you, right? Didn't you already buy the technology you wanted? Sue-E said with a faint smile. But your new flyer has a limited number of technicians, and the support you can provide is also limited. So it's impossible for you to provide support and follow up to all these people at the same time. If you just transfer this technology to us or focus on providing support to us, I think that this technology will be used much faster in our hands. No matter how you look at it, it's better than distributing it to those small countries and companies that you don't even know the names of, right? Descartes Marquis continued. Then according to what you said, wouldn't it be better for me to focus on providing this technology to those small countries and companies that buy the technology? Sue-E grinned. They're not like your two empires who want to develop all the technology in one go. Most of them only hope to specialize in a few or even just one. In comparison, I believe that it's easier for them to focus on developing faster. I'm afraid that's not right. Shans Marquis shook his head. No matter what, our two empires are much stronger than them. No matter how you look at it, our conditions are better than theirs, so it's obviously easier for us to develop. Other things aside, just in terms of magicians, our two empires are much stronger than any other country and organization. Descartes Marquis nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to speak, Sue-E raised his hand and stopped him. Speaking of which, about the issue of magicians, how's the consideration from your two empires? The two were stunned. They looked at each other and fell silent at the same time. Seeing their reaction, Sue-E immediately understood that the two empires had not made up their minds about the suggestion he had made 3 months ago. So you're saying that you're not willing to agree? Sue-E laughed coldly. You're not willing to agree to my request, yet you're making such an unreasonable request. Do you think I'll agree? The two hurriedly squeezed out a smile. Descartes Marquis said, Chairman Sue, don't misunderstand. This is completely different. The empires are still discussing the issue of magicians. You know that we have to get a consensus with the magicians in the Empire. Without their agreement, how can we? You don't have to worry about the magicians. He waved his hand. Last month, I've already met with the people in charge of the Sorcerers Guild and the Employment Security Association. They've all agreed to my suggestion. In addition, I've also talked to all the magicians in your two empires in private. They've all agreed. So, now, only the opinions of your two empires are left. The two were still in a difficult position. Even if our two empires agree, there's so many other countries on the continent. Your two empires have agreed, the two magician associations have agreed, our new flyer has agreed. Who else dares to disagree? He raised his voice slightly. Seeing the serious expression on Su Yi's face, Descartes Marquis and Sean's Marquis looked at each other again and smiled bitterly at the same time. In fact, Su Yi's words had already given them a lot of face as representatives of the two empires. With New Flyer's unparalleled reputation in the signs, as long as New Flyer made a request, there was probably no country or organization on the continent that dared to oppose it. As for the opinions of the individual magicians, didn't they hear what Su Yi had just said? He'd already reached a consensus with all the magicians in the two empires. Which magician would be so blind as to raise an objection? Then, Chairman Su, if our two empires agree to this matter, can you reconsider the request we just made? Descartes Marquis asked again. Su Yi glanced at the two and smiled. Descartes Marquis, didn't you just say that these are two different things? How can you mix them up? Sean's Marquis and Descartes Marquis could only exchange a helpless look again, speechless. Chapter 1136. The public transfer of technology other than household magic machines was only New Flyer's first big move after entering the new year. The 1st of April was a special day in a certain plane, but it wasn't a strange day in signs. The Signs Sorcerers Guild and the Signs Association for Mage Survival and Employment, the two largest magic organizations on the continent, joined forces with the Canla Empire, the Malar Empire, the Lampari Kingdom, the Mana Magic Kingdom, the Kingdom of Ruhr, the Nozdormu Business Union Kingdom, and a total of 83 other countries to make a public announcement. The two major magic associations and more than 4/5 of the countries on Signs, including the two empires, signed a peace pact of mages, which proposed new rules and regulations for the mages on the continent. The content of this strangely named peace pact of mages was very long, but there was only one sentence that really caught people's attention. From the day the pact was signed, all mages on Signs who were registered with the two major magic associations were not allowed to directly participate in any wars. Those who violated the pact would be collectively expelled from the two major magic associations and would be treated as the public enemy of all mages on the continent. The Sorcerers Guild didn't need to be mentioned, and the Mage Survival and Employment Association for Mage Survival and Employment had developed vigorously with the support of New Flyer over the years. They had long become a large magic organization that wasn't any weaker than the Sorcerers Guild. If these two magic organizations simultaneously expressed that they wanted to restrict the mages on the continent, it basically meant that this rule would become an iron law for the majority of mages on the continent. In other words, as long as the mages on Signs wanted to continue living on the continent, they couldn't directly participate in wars like before. At the same time, the 83 countries, including the two empires, also announced that they wouldn't recruit any mages into their armies and wouldn't allow any mages to directly participate in wars. This also meant that even if a mage wanted to go against the rules of the two major magic associations and participate in wars, no country's army would recruit them, and they wouldn't be able to do anything. It had to be said that the Magicians' Peace Pact was completely against the traditions of the Signs. As early as 3,000 years ago, when humans first began to master magic, human magicians had already set the place where they realized their worth on the battlefield. Regardless of whether it was the racial war 3,000 years ago, the conflicts between humans and other races, or the wars between the various human countries after the conquest of this continent, the mages could be said to be the protagonists and favorites of war. In everyone's opinion, Magicians who had mastered magic and possessed great destructive power could only display their value through battle. The reason why archmages were revered and worshipped by everyone was because archmages were the pinnacle of all magicians. They possessed destructive power that could even change the outcome of a battle. This concept had persisted in human society on signs for over 3,000 years and had long been deeply ingrained in everyone's minds. But now, the two magician associations and almost all the countries on the continent were telling everyone that magicians were no longer allowed to participate in the war. What a joke! If the sorcerers did not participate in the war, where would they go to show their value? Didn't the mages have nothing to do other than fight? Wait, these words were indeed reasonable on the previous Science continent, but on the current Science continent, it wasn't that reasonable. The difference was that the previous signs did not have the new flyer, and there was no magic industry, but now there was. When people suppressed the absurdity of this news in their hearts, they discovered a very important problem. Among the representatives who signed the Magicians' Peace Pact, apart from the two magician associations and a large number of countries, including the two empires, there was also a somewhat unusual name because it represented a chamber of commerce. This chamber of commerce was naturally the New Flyer. Anyone who carefully read the Magicians' Peace Pact would discover that the New Flyer's name appeared a few times in this pact. The pact even clearly stated that this Magicians' Peace Pact was reached under the proposal of a New Flyer. At the same time, it was also because of the New Flyer's active communication that the two magician associations and the 83 countries, including the two empires, finally agreed to this pact. There was no need to guess. Everyone understood that the New Flyer spent so much effort to reach this pact for its own benefits. So where did the benefits of this pact come from for the New Flyer? As long as one was not an idiot, it was easy to deduce. Because of the restrictions of this pact, magicians could no longer directly participate in the war and could no longer enjoy all kinds of special treatment because they joined the armies of the two empires. Then, where would the more than 100,000 magicians on the continent go? They couldn't all run off to become guards for the various chambers of commerce, could they? At this time, the New Flyer could provide another way out for these magicians, and that was to devote themselves to the magic industry and research magic machines. In the past 20 years or so, the New Flyer had used facts to prove that magicians who devoted themselves to the magic industry could also receive high rewards and display their value. In the war last year, where the New Flyer and a few other countries joined forces to defeat the two empires, the New Flyer's military magic machines could even directly kill archmages and even render all other magicians useless. According to the New Flyer, the main people who developed such powerful military magic machines were actually the researchers of the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce. Among these researchers, there was only one great magician, and the rest were ordinary adept magicians. Relying on the strength of a great magician and an ordinary magician to defeat or even kill an archmage, this had never happened before in the history of the signs. Thus, after this battle, the magicians of the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce were hung with a sacred halo over the other magicians of the continent. Even if the rewards of this reputation were ignored, according to the data revealed by the New Flyer, these researchers of the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce had a fixed monthly salary of more than 50 gold coins, and some even earned more than 2,000 gold coins a year. Not to mention, the great magicians currently employed by the New Flyer had already earned more than 10,000 gold coins a year since 10 years ago. This kind of salary, even if it was placed on the entire Signs continent, it would definitely be at the top. Compared to serving in the armies of the various empires or working as guards for other chambers of commerce, the salary of working in the New Flyer was much higher. More importantly, this job didn't require one to risk one's life. Thus, when people understood these issues through the various newspapers and the new moon news that was broadcasted on magic projection devices, they immediately discovered that the appearance of the Magicians' Peace Pact wasn't something that would cause the magicians to lose the opportunity to display their value, but instead allowed them to gain a wider world. In fact, After the appearance of the new flyer and its development to a certain extent, these things had always been controversial in the sign circle. Some magicians believed that as a high and mighty magician, they should display their powerful destructive power through battle and demonstrate their superior status. Some magicians were more pragmatic and felt that as long as they could earn money, it didn't matter what they did. Before the appearance of the Magicians' Peace Pact, these two factions of magicians were the ones who supported magicians participating in battle. After all, this was a tradition that had existed for thousands of years in the signs. However, after the appearance of the Magicians' Peace Pact, the pragmatic magicians instantly gained the upper hand, completely suppressing the warmongering faction. In the end, this was because the new flyer had displayed unparalleled strength in the war last year. The two empires were powerless to resist and were forced to seek peace. In the current signs, the new flyer represented absolute power. Since this matter was led by the Frestec Chamber of Commerce, and they had already obtained the agreement of the two magicians' associations and the two empires, as well as the support of all the famous archmagi on the continent, the normal magicians didn't have any room to refute this. Moreover, after the announcement, the two empires immediately announced a series of announcements to the public about developing the magic industry. They expressed that they would fully support the development of the magic industry in their country in the future and fully cooperate with the new flyer, striving to popularize the magic industry in their country as soon as possible. For this reason, the two empires cooperated with the new flyer to open two new magic academies in the two empires. They specialized in providing training for magicians to participate in the magic industry. The goal was to allow magicians who weren't familiar with the magic industry to quickly obtain the necessary knowledge and skills to research magic machines, making it easier for them to participate in the magic industry. The two empires also offered a series of preferential conditions for magicians who were willing to participate in the magic industry. For example, the tuition fees for studying in the new magic academies were waived, the taxes for working in the magic industry were reduced, and after obtaining the qualifications of a magico-mechanical engineer from the Xinfei Chamber of Commerce, they would receive special treatment as a citizen, and so on. All in all, it was one sentence. Are you a magician? Hurry up and join the magic industry. Chapter 1137. Separating the magicians from the battlefield and forcing them to enter the magic machine industry. This could be considered Su Yi's first step in developing the magic machine industry. The magic machine industry was a very wide industry, so to fully develop it, other than magicians, there were other aspects that couldn't be lacking. After announcing the Magicians' Peace Pact, Su Yi's next goal was to increase the large amount of people needed to develop the industry. Due to the limitations of the society's productivity, although the humans of the signs had been on the continent for thousands of years, their population had never been able to develop. Even now, there were only less than 200 million humans in the signs. Compared to the vast signs, this small population was without a doubt very sparse. For the comprehensive and mature magic machine industrial system that Su Yi wanted, the labor force provided by these people was far from enough. Of course, Su Yi couldn't increase the population of the signs by a large amount because it required a large amount of time as a foundation. So with the current limitations, Su Yi chose two methods to solve this problem. The first method was to start from the basics. After the Magicians' Peace Pact was announced for a month, the new flyer made another large move. On the 3rd of May, the new flyer held another press conference, announcing that the new flyer would provide agricultural magic machine support to the 26 countries. This support didn't just include providing a set of agricultural magic machines. It also included providing the Lampari Kingdom with a new farming method based on the agricultural magic machines. It would help the 26 countries quickly grasp the modern farming method that the new flyer called New Flyer, greatly increasing their grain yield. After this news was analyzed by the various newspapers, people found that the Xinfei Chamber of Commerce had carefully chosen the 26 countries. Of these 26 countries, each country had a common characteristic. It was that their country's terrain was relatively flat, with most of it being plains and most of it being arable. This also meant that these countries were most suited for the new flyers' new farming method, so it was easier for them to be influenced by this new farming method, quickly increasing their grain yield. For the new flyers' choice, there were even more countries that gave their opinions. They said that their countries had the same suitable land for farming, so they needed the new flyers' help to increase their grain yield. The Frestec Chamber of Commerce's side said that the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's choice was based on the situation of each country. The 26 countries they chose this time were the ones most suited for promoting this new farming method, but that didn't mean that the Frestec Chamber of Commerce would give up on the other countries. After this, the new flyer would develop different kinds of agricultural magic machines based on different countries, different terrains, and different geology, trying to satisfy all kinds of needs. At the same time, the new flyer also said that increasing the grain yield of the signs, letting everyone have enough food and clothing was the goal of the new flyer, as well as the goal of all the people and countries on the continent. So the new flyer hoped that all the countries and organizations on the continent would cooperate with them on this. The new flyer didn't say what would happen to the countries and organizations that didn't cooperate, but no one would ask this question without knowing. So the first method was to increase the grain yield of the signs, which would greatly increase the population of the signs. As for the second method, it was to start with the current conditions. The manpower of the signs was limited and the effective labor force was even more limited. If they wanted to develop the magic machine industry under these restrictions, of course, they had to increase the quality of the current labor force. So the new flyers signed agreements with all the countries on the continent, including the two empires. They planned to build over 500 magic machine industry training schools in these countries. The teaching structure of these schools was the same as the Frestec Academy. It was to teach the students some knowledge related to the magic machine industry. It was to lay down a foundation for them, so that they could enter the magic machine industry as soon as possible and better. This plan was warmly welcomed by all the countries on the continent, but because the investment in these schools wasn't small and the finances of many countries were limited, the new flyer had to take care of most of the funding for these schools. Of course, the new flyer wasn't investing for nothing. There wasn't a country that wanted to give the control of these schools to a foreign organization. So in order to obtain the control of these schools, the new flyer took the initiative to propose signing agreements with the new flyer. These agreements mainly involved the various resources of these countries. The new flyer invested in these countries to build magic machine industry training schools, so they could obtain the rights to a portion of the resources. It could be considered a type of exchange. According to the new flyer's private estimates, because the teaching process of these schools would take 3 to 5 years to complete, and because many countries on the continent needed to prepare for the development of the magic machine industry, it would take 3 to 5 years for these measures to take effect. Within these few years, the new flyer had something equally important to do, which was to stabilize the situation on the continent and provide a stable and peaceful environment for the development of the magic machine industry. Although the two empires were forced to sign an armistice agreement with the new flyer, which represented the end of the war that affected the entire continent, it didn't mean that the continent had completely returned to peace. The most obvious example was the Kamla Empire. Because of the invasion of the new flyer and the Kingdom of Ruhr, the Kamla Empire suffered successive defeats, and the Kingdom of Ruhr's allied forces even approached the capital, Wimbledon City, which caused the internal situation of the Kamla Empire to become turbulent. When the new flyers signed the armistice agreement, close to half of the provinces in the Kamla Empire had declared independence or were in a state of chaos. When the Kamla Empire and the new flyers signed the armistice agreement, both sides stopped fighting, and the Kingdom of Ruhr's allied forces withdrew from the Kamla Empire. Of the nearly half of the provinces that rebelled, a small portion immediately returned to normal and declared their return to the Kamla Empire. However, more than half of the provinces still remained independent or fell into an even more chaotic situation. The reason why the Kamla Empire straightforwardly agreed to the armistice agreement proposed by the new flyer was because the alliance with the Malar Empire had suffered a crushing defeat. The second reason was that the internal situation was extremely chaotic, and there was no way to continue. After the armistice with the new flyer, the Kanla Empire's imperial family and a portion of the nobles that were still loyal to the imperial family immediately began to stabilize the internal situation. However, the power of the Kanla Empire's imperial family had been greatly damaged in the previous battles with the Kingdom of Ruer's allied forces, to the extent that they were unable to pacify the internal rebellions. Although they had achieved some results in the beginning, allowing more than half of the rebellious provinces to return to the Kanla Empire's rule, there were a few hard bones that had not been gnawed off. Among these bones, the southern province was the hardest one. The Kanla Empire's imperial family had been trying to recover the southern province since the beginning of this year, but they had spent an entire 4 months without achieving their goal. Rather, they had suffered many setbacks, causing the Kanla Empire's people to become unstable once again. Being forced to helplessly, the Kanla Empire had placed their request for help on a new flyer. When he received the Kanla Empire's request for help, Su-yi was stunned for half a minute. But after considering the gains and losses, Su-yi quickly made his decision. Half a month later, at noon on the 24th of May, the new flyer's magic airship squadron arrived in the former Kanla Empire's southern province, which was now the Windsor Kingdom's capital of Doral City. Seeing the appearance of the magic airship squadron, the Windsor Kingdom's king, the former Kanla Empire's southern province's Duke Windsor, didn't have any thoughts of resisting. He quickly reached an agreement with the emissary sent by the new flyer and announced a full surrender. The Windsor Kingdom had only existed for half a year before it was declared extinct. It returned to the Kanla Empire and became the southern province again. After recovering the southern province, the Kanla Empire unexpectedly didn't execute Duke Windsor's entire family. Rather, they let Duke Windsor be the southern province's governor, continuing to control everything in the southern province. At first glance, it seemed like Duke Windsor hadn't rebelled before. Everyone knew that for such an unbelievable result to occur, it had to be because of the new flyer. As expected, after the Kanla Empire recovered the southern province, they quickly announced a new policy. The southern province would become a new economic demonstration area for the Kanla Empire, opening it to all companies outside the Kanla Empire and Kanla Empire. Any company could freely invest here and enjoy the preferential policies of the Kanla Empire. Although this policy wasn't directed at the new flyer, everyone knew that the Kanla Empire did this because of the new flyer's request. Of course, this result was welcomed by all the companies on the continent. Even the companies in the Kanla Empire weren't an exception. After all, what business needed the most was freedom. The stronger the merchant, the more they liked it. Even the weaker merchants and chambers of commerce could find their own opportunities in the market. So once this policy was announced, it attracted the praise of countless people. However, in this atmosphere of celebration, it was unknown if it was intentional or not, but everyone forgot that the place that belonged to the Kanla Empire was now called the Toria Autonomous Region. Chapter 1138. Su-yi, I'm finding it harder and harder to figure out what you're thinking, Cruz said as he raised an eyebrow at Su-yi. What's wrong? Su-yi smiled. His smile was as relaxed and clean as ever. He wasn't the scheming and ruthless president of a new flyer that many people imagined him to be. However, it was this kind of smile that made Chairman Cruz feel even more depressed. When you weren't willing to discuss how to deal with the Toria Autonomous Region with the Kandra Empire, everyone thought that you wanted to take it into your Frestac Chamber of Commerce's hands and even play as a king. This is something that even the Kandra Empire has tacitly agreed to, but you haven't made a move after all this time. So what are you thinking? How do you plan to deal with this place? I'm not interested in being king. Su-yi shrugged. You've known me for so long. You should know better. Of course I know you're not interested in being king. Otherwise, the Principality of Constantine would have changed its name to Shinfei long ago, Cruz said with a wave of his hand. But you forcefully took the Toria province from the Kandra Empire. Could it be that you're planning on not caring about it? Who said I'm going to leave it like that? Hasn't the governing council been operating normally? Cruz glared at him. Stop joking around. Toria. Fine. The Toria Autonomous Region is such a huge place. Do you intend to use this so-called self-governing council to maintain it forever? That's too ridiculous. What's so ridiculous about that? Sui glared at Cruz. Do you think that we have to form a country to govern this place? Isn't that so? Sui rolled his eyes at Cruz's bold retort, but he couldn't be bothered to retort. He indeed wasn't interested in being the first king of the Toria kingdom like many people in the company suggested, but it was hard enough to take such an important place like the Toria province from the Kandra Empire. So naturally Sui wouldn't let it return to the Kandra Empire. After the Kamla Empire reclaimed the southern provinces with the help of the new flyer, they expressed their desire to reclaim Toria as well. However, Sui ignored them, and the Kamla Empire had no choice but to accept the status quo for the time being. However, the new flyer didn't let Toria declare its independence. Instead, they used the name of the autonomous region and the Toria Autonomous Council led by New Flyer to maintain the operations of the autonomous region. This puzzled many people. New Flyer didn't intend to own Toria in name, but they also didn't want to return it to the Kamla Empire. What exactly did they intend to do? President Cruz was also puzzled. However, unlike others, he was a close partner of Sui and the New Flyer. That was why he decided to ask this question in front of Sui. However, Sui's plans for Toria were too complicated and he couldn't be bothered to explain them to President Cruz. For example, in his plan, the Toria Autonomous Region would first become the largest harbor in the south of the Signs continent. With the Toria Autonomous Region's wide southern coastline and its special location, it would become the most important port in the southern seas of the Signs continent, as well as the main transport hub between the east and west of the continent. In the future, when a magic industry in Signs fully developed, the Toria Autonomous Region will be able to control most of the maritime traffic in Signs, since the endless seas in the northern part of the continent would be in a frozen state for half a year. With New Flyer in control of Toria, it would be equivalent to controlling the maritime traffic. Coupled with New Flyer's unparalleled maritime prowess, the entire magic industry in Signs would be greatly affected by New Flyer. Sui couldn't explain this idea to President Cruz. Not to mention, in his plan, the Toria Autonomous Region would also bear the responsibility of being the gateway to the southern hemisphere of the planet. It would be the main window for communication between Signs and other continents. Although the Principality of Constantine had developed very well under the management of New Flyer for many years, its geographical location was still a bit off. Although it was still convenient to communicate with the Magic Cloud continent, it would be much more troublesome to communicate with the other two continents that had already been explored. Moreover, the Principality of Constantine was too small. Its neighbors were the Lampari Kingdom and the Kingdom of Ruhr. Sui couldn't invade the territories of these two countries. Naturally, he could only find a new place to develop. Moreover, the Toria Autonomous Region already had a certain magic industry foundation after the cooperation between New Flyer and the Kamla Empire. It would be easier to develop. You don't have to worry about what I plan to do. Anyway, the mission of the Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce is to build a complete road network in the Toria Autonomous Region within 3 years. How about it? Can you do it? Sui waved his hand and said to President Cruz. President Cruz pursed his lips. What do you take the Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce for? It's such a simple mission. Do you need to inform me of it so seriously? Tell me, there must be something else, right? Sui chuckled and patted President Cruz's shoulder with a you-know-me expression. He continued, That's right. I have a more daring plan, but it's also more difficult. Are you interested? President Cruz's expression immediately changed. He opened his eyes wide and asked, What plan? Let's hear it. President Cruz had been working with Sui for more than 20 years. He knew that Sui would often come up with some bold and even inconceivable ideas. But afterwards, Sui's ideas would always prove to be very good, and he would always get great benefits. Therefore, President Cruz was always very excited every time he heard of Sui's new ideas and plans. Well, you should know that our Chamber of Commerce has been investing in the Demon Cloud continent, right? President Cruz was startled. He didn't expect Su-yi to suddenly change the topic to the Demon Cloud continent, which was more than 10,000 kilometers away from here. Ah, I know. What's wrong? Is this plan related to the Demon Cloud continent? Yes. Cruz, I plan to further strengthen the development of the Demon Cloud continent. The first thing to do is to pave a lot of roads on the Demon Cloud continent. So, I need the help of your Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce. Chairman Cruz slightly frowned. Hasn't our Chamber of Commerce been doing this for a long time? The two construction teams that we sent previously haven't returned home for more than a year. Our employees have already complained many times. No, not enough, far from enough. So, he emphasized, the development of the Demon Cloud continent in this plan is not like before. It's just a kind of exploration, but a real development in the sense. Two construction teams are far from enough to meet my requirements. What I need is 20 or even more. Hearing the affirmation in Su-yi's tone, President Cruz knew that he was not joking. He smiled bitterly. Su-yi, it's not like you don't know the current situation of our Chamber of Commerce. Now, a large number of countries in the signs are responding to the call of your new flyer. In order to vigorously develop the magic industry, roads must be built first. Last month, our Chamber of Commerce received orders to build roads with a total mileage of more than 30,000 kilometers. Now, the construction teams of our Chamber of Commerce are far from enough. What do you want me to get you another 20? I don't care about that. You think about the way I'm only responsible for making requests. He shook his head. As for the benefits that your Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce will get from it, I can't guarantee you now, but I'm sure that you will be satisfied in the future. President Cruz stared at Su-yi for a long time and couldn't help but sigh. If someone else heard you, they would turn around and leave. But I believe you. Well, I will try to find a way to meet your requirements. But you have to tell me when you need it first, right? Now you want me to get 20 construction teams. I can't do it even if you kill me. Su-yi grinned, revealing a mouth full of neat white teeth. Don't worry now. At least wait until the situation of the whole continent is completely stabilized. Well, that's right. President Cruz nodded. Then his expression moved. By the way, you used to only explore the Demon Cloud continent, but now you suddenly came up with this idea. Is it because the situation in the signs made you uneasy, but now you can rest assured? Yes. In the past, if I transferred the main forces to the Demon Cloud continent, maybe my hometown would have been destroyed by the guys from the two empires. As for now, I don't need to worry about this problem. President Cruz laughed. After a war between the two empires and the new flyer that affected the whole continent, the people in the signs recognized a fact that was, don't provoke the new flyer easily. Even powerful countries like the two empires couldn't resist the attack of the new flyer. So how could other countries have the ability to fight back? If there were some countries on this continent that coveted and plotted against the new flyer who controlled the magic industry, then after this war, all countries, including the two empires, basically cut off the idea of using force against the new flyer. In the past, the new flyer had to put a powerful force like the Chamber of Commerce guards in the signs, just in case. Now, because no country dared to provoke the new flyer could spare some of its most powerful forces and put them into the Demon Cloud continent. Therefore, Su-yi had the idea of fully developing the Demon Cloud continent, which was entirely based on the support of enough armed forces. Thinking of this, President Cruz's thoughts gradually became clear. Chapter 1139. As the weather slowly became warmer, the situation in the signs slowly stabilized. After the Kanla Empire easily recovered the southern provinces with the help of the new flyer, the 10 provinces that declared independence quickly returned to the embrace of the Kanla Empire. As for the provinces that fell into chaos, they didn't even need to mobilize the new flyer's guards. Under the powerful attacks of the Kanla Empire's royal army, they didn't last long and returned to peace. Very quickly, the internal strife of the Kanla Empire was completely suppressed. On the surface, apart from the Toria province becoming the Toria autonomous region and their attitude towards the Kanla Empire being ambiguous, the Kanla Empire didn't seem to have changed much compared to before the war. The only difference was that their cooperation with the new flyer became closer. Compared to this, the Malar Empire, which was also one of the two empires, didn't change much. Even if they had suffered heavy losses in the battle with the Lampuri Kingdom, the Drake Duchy, and the Frestek Chamber of Commerce's army, as well as suffering heavy losses in the battle with the Kandra Empire's army, this didn't harm the foundation of the Marlow Empire. The invasion of the Kamla Empire led to rebellions in several provinces. The Malar Empire's internal situation could be said to be very stable from start to finish. There weren't any dissenting voices. After the war ended, the Malar Empire recovered much faster than the Kamla Empire. In less than half a year, they had almost recovered to their original state. Of course, the cooperation between the Malar Empire and the New Flyer was originally closer. After this war, this close relationship became even deeper. In addition to the agreements signed with the Lampari Kingdom and the Drake Duchy, as well as the large amounts of technology and support that the Malar Empire obtained from the New Flyer, the magic machine industry blossomed all over the Malar Empire. Almost every city, every noble's territory, all kinds of factories could be seen. It was a lively scene. Now that the two empires had returned to normal, the signs had also returned to normal. Compared to before the war, it seemed that only New Flyer had gained a higher reputation in the signs. The magic industry had become more sought after by the various countries on the continent, but everything else seemed to be the same. Of course, the Sat Kingdom and the Drow Kingdom that had disappeared in the history of signs definitely wouldn't think this. However, they had already been eliminated by this era, so naturally, no one would pay attention to them. Most people's attention was still on the New Flyer. To the New Flyer, apart from the enormous prestige and fame gained from defeating the two empires, what was more significant and valued was the benefits. Apart from the preferential policies of the two empires and the actual resources obtained from the Armistice Agreement, the most obvious benefit that New Flyer had obtained after this was that all aspects of trade had finally returned to normal. As soon as the news of the Armistice Agreement between the two empires and New Flyer was spread, all kinds of orders that had been cut off because of the war were sent to the New Flyer like snowflakes. In just a month after the Armistice Agreement was signed, New Flyer had received 80% of the orders from a year before. As the situation on the continent stabilized and the attitudes of the two empires were confirmed, New Flyer's orders quickly increased. When it came to June, when New Flyer did internal sales statistics, they found that in the first 5 months of this year, just the sales of the Xinfei Household Magical Machinery Chamber of Commerce had far surpassed the sales of the year before, even surpassing it by 40%. This also meant that after this war, not only did New Flyer not suffer a large loss in terms of trade, it had actually soared because of this. Of course, this was something that was very easy to understand. After all, through this war, New Flyer's fame had already entered the ears of everyone in the signs, leaving a deep impression that couldn't be erased. With just a single company, they could defeat the armies of the two empires and force the two empires to admit defeat. This was several times more effective than any advertisement. So although this impression was a bit different from reality, New Flyer was without a doubt the strongest company in the history of the signs. Since it was the strongest company, of course the things it produced were the best. So the people who doubted New Flyer and doubted new things like magic machines couldn't help buying the magic machines produced by New Flyer out of curiosity. Normal citizens couldn't use magic machines, but household magic machines could be used. So this caused the sales of the Xinfei Household Magical Machinery Chamber of Commerce to soar. Other than the Xinfei Household Magical Machinery Chamber of Commerce, the sales of the other New Flyer branches also increased to varying degrees. The one with the most exaggerated growth was without a doubt the Xinfei Heavy Magic Machine Company. Just in the month of May, the Xinfei Heavy Magic Machine Company's sales had broken 17 million gold coins. Of the 17 million gold coins in sales, over 5 million gold coins were related to agricultural magic machines, and over 10 million gold coins were related to production magic machines. The reason why the sales of magic machines had exploded was because the various countries in the signs were trying to develop the magic machine industry. So naturally, they needed large amounts of magic machines. This was just the beginning of these countries' attempts. When they found some insights and began developing on a large scale, the demand for magic machines would become even more exaggerated. According to the estimates of the Xinfei Heavy Magic Machine Company, they had a chance of breaking the terrifying 400 million gold coins in sales by the end of the year. If it was like this, just a single Xinfei Heavy Magic Machine Company branch would have a yearly profit of over 50 million gold coins. Calculating the current situation of the Xinfei Household Magical Machinery Chamber of Commerce and the Xinfei Heavy Magic Machine Company, as well as the other branches of the New Flyer, the New Flyer's yearly profit this year would have a terrifying breakthrough. It was even possible for it to double the yearly profit before the war. Regarding this result, the high-level members of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce were happy and worried. The happy thing was that after the New Flyer's losses from the war 2 years ago, they had finally received the good news of a large increase in profits. The worried thing was that after the war, the New Flyer had signed a large number of contracts with close to 100 countries, including the two empires. They needed to invest a terrifying amount of money, so the pressure on the company wasn't small. Moreover, the chairman had proposed an even more terrifying plan. If nothing unexpected happened, all of the New Flyer's profits for the next few years would be thrown in, and they might not even see any profits. If the same large-scale war happened again, whether or not the New Flyer had the strength to persist was a problem. However, just like how no country in the signs dared to defy the New Flyer, no one in the New Flyer dared to defy the chairman. The New Flyer high-level members didn't even have the strength to be surprised by the new plan proposed by the chairman. They could only resolutely carry it out without any hesitation and do their best to realize this plan. Not to mention how complicated this plan was. Just the New Flyer's post-war recovery was already very troublesome. During the war, most of the New Flyer's decisions and manpower were focused on providing support to the New Flyer Guards. After the war, not only could the New Flyer Guards not be reduced in size, they even had to be expanded. Apart from ensuring that the New Flyer had enough deterrence, it was also for the New Flyer's future development. Therefore, after the war ended, the New Flyer once again issued a public recruitment. Due to the terrifying battle strength the New Flyer Guards displayed in this war, countless people on the continent felt proud to join the New Flyer Guards. As a result, more than 300,000 people applied for the open recruitment this time. In the end, the New Flyer only recruited 5,000 people, and the recruitment rate wasn't even 1/60th. However, even though it was only an increase of 5,000 people, there was a lot of work to be done for these 5,000 people. Therefore, the staff surrounding the New Flyer Guards have been extremely busy during this period. Apart from the expansion of the New Flyer Guards, the reconstruction of a New Flyer's business relationship was also of the utmost importance. The fact that the New Flyer was able to completely restore its business relationship in such a short period of time, and it was even better than before, had a lot to do with the hard work of the staff during this period of time. In addition, just restoring it to its original state wasn't enough. In order to help other countries develop the magic industry, the New Flyer needed work that was incomparably complicated. In order to solve these tasks, they needed a lot of manpower. Therefore, the New Flyer had no choice but to recruit a lot of people from other departments, which made the New Flyer's personnel department very busy. After recruiting people, they were also responsible for training them and helping them adapt to their jobs faster. There were a lot of things that needed to be done. Not only were the higher-ups and managers busy, but the ordinary employees were also busy. Because the New Flyer's orders were squeezed due to the war, and because of the large number of orders that came in during this period of time, the ordinary employees had no choice but to work overtime like crazy. Of course, for these ordinary employees, it was also a good thing. After all, the overtime pay was higher. Therefore, since the armistice, almost everyone in the New Flyer fell into an extremely busy state. But just as everyone was working hard, Sui suddenly announced a decision that was out of everyone's expectations. It sounded very unprofessional. He actually wanted to hold a personal press conference. Chapter 1140. Banta City in June was already a bit hot. With the bright sunlight falling down, the streets of Banta City that were covered in cement began to heat up. It made people sweat not long after walking on the streets, which didn't feel good at all. However, this didn't reduce the number of people in Banta City. It was still a lively and prosperous scene. As the place where the new flyer was established, the origin of the magic machine industry on the continent, as well as the transfer point for goods from the Lampari Kingdom, the Kingdom of Ruhr, and the Principality of Constantine, Banta City had become one of the most prosperous cities in the Lampari Kingdom, as well as the southwest corner of the continent. Now that Banta City had been expanded several times, just the city area was more than 20 times the size of the old Banta City. The resident population had gone from around 50,000 to over 600,000 2 years ago, becoming the most populous city in the Lampari Kingdom. It even had 100,000 more people than the royal capital, Anvilmar City. If there were large amounts of people moving around, it was possible for Banta City's total population to surpass 1 million. With such a large population in a city, naturally it would be incomparably lively and prosperous at any time. But today, this liveliness and prosperity were even more obvious than normal, especially in the streets of Banta City's Old City District. There were twice as many people walking on the streets compared to normal, filling all the streets of Banta City's Old City District. It was so crowded that not even a drop of water could pass through. This was without a doubt a very strange phenomenon. Since Banta City's new city area was expanded with the guidance of the City Lord Manor, Banta City's new magic machine industry and new people had been moving to the new city area. Even the citizens of Banta City who used to live in the old city area gradually moved to the new city area because the new city area was better and the facilities were more convenient. In the current Banta City's old city area, the resident population was much less compared to before. It was around 30,000 people, so it couldn't be crowded at all. The only possibility for this was that there was some kind of eye-catching event being held in the old city area. However, if there was an eye-catching event, it would be held in the new city area. After all, the new city district was more spacious and convenient for transportation. No matter how one looked at it, it was much better than the old city district. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the old city district would always be quiet and peaceful, which was almost the opposite of the new city district. Today was an exception. Whether it was the residents of the old city district or the people of the new city district who came to the old city district today, they were not surprised by this situation at all. Because the Banta Times had already announced today's event several days ago. On the 18th of June, the New Flyers chairman Sue would be holding a press conference in Banta City. If one were to ask which city on the signs was the closest to the New Flyer, most people would think of Banta City when they mentioned Shinfei City that was built by the New Flyer. As the city where the New Flyer was built, the New Flyer could be considered closely connected to Banta City in the early part of the year. If it wasn't for the chaos in the Lampari Kingdom that forced the New Flyer out of Banta City and out of the Lampari Kingdom, the New Flyer's main base would still be in Banta City. The falling rain valley outside Banta City was still the most important magic machine industry base in Banta City and even the Lampari Kingdom. Most of the things were left by the Shinfei Chamber of Commerce. The citizens of Banta City still remembered the changes that the New Flyer brought to Banta City after it appeared. Moreover, they were still enjoying the benefits that the New Flyer left for Banta City, so naturally they had deep feelings for the New Flyer. So when they heard that Sue was coming to Banta City to hold a press conference, the people of Banta City were all excited and looked forward to it. On the 18th of June, there were countless people that came to Banta City's old city area early in the morning. It wasn't for anything else. It was just to personally attend Sue Yi's press conference and see Sue Yi again. Since the press conference in Banta City many years ago, Sue hadn't appeared in public for over 10 years. Even if he had appeared on the battlefield with the Kanla Empire, most normal people rarely saw him. At most, they could only see his image through the magic illusion projectors that the new Moon Chamber of Commerce had set up in various places. Even if they didn't care about the New Flyer and Sue Yi, just based on the fact that Sue Yi could be considered the most famous person in the signs and was also a powerful archmagus, it was enough to attract countless people to personally see him. Among the people that came to Bana City's old city area, other than normal citizens, there were also countless reporters from the various countries and cities of the signs. Holding a press conference. This was definitely the biggest news in the past half a year other than the signing of the ceasefire agreement between the two empires and the new flyer. There wasn't a single newspaper that was willing to miss it. Moreover, although the Frestec Chamber of Commerce had held many press conferences and product announcements before, this was the first time that they had held a press conference for a single person. Not to mention that this was Su Yi's press conference, so everyone was very interested. Just what did he want to announce through this press conference? So as soon as they received this news, all the newspapers on the continent sent reporters to Bana City. There were even many reporters who came to Bana City's old city area several days ahead of time, waiting for Su Yi's press conference. Facts proved that these reporters who came ahead of time were wise. On the 18th of June, Banta City's old city area was already filled with countless people that there was no way to walk. If one wanted to walk to the press conference, Banta City's city square, it was incomparably difficult. It was a good thing that the Banta City Lore Manor had already expected this situation, so they had placed large amounts of city guards on the streets ahead of time to maintain order. But even so, the streets of the old city area were completely blocked since early morning. Every street that led to the city square was filled with anxious people. But outside the old city area, there were countless people heading towards the old city area, not having any intentions of stopping at all. Chairman Su, you really caused me a disaster this time. Banta City's City Lord Count Belmo looked at the chaotic street in the distance and complained to Su Yi beside him with a bitter smile. I spent quite a bit of effort to restore the old city area to its previous peace, but now that you're here, all my efforts have been wasted. Su Yi laughed and made a helpless hand gesture to Count Belmo. I never thought that it would cause such a large reaction. I thought that at most some reporters would be interested in my press conference, but I never thought that the citizens would also be interested. Count Belmo could only keep giving a bitter smile. Chairman Su, could it be that you don't know how popular you are in the hearts of the citizens? Since your new flyer defeated the two empires, I dare say that in the hearts of most people on the continent, you as the new flyer's chairman isn't inferior to a god. Tell me, a god has suddenly descended to Bana City and is publicly meeting everyone. How could people not go crazy over this? You're exaggerating too much. Su Yi slowly shook his head. First, it wasn't our new flyer that defeated the two empires. Rather, it was your Lampari kingdom and the kingdom of Ruhr that defeated them together. Second, this isn't just my merit alone. It should be the merit of everyone in the Frestec Chamber of Commerce. Count Belmo pointed at the crowd in the distance. Tell them this. See if they'll listen. Su Yi rolled his eyes. He thought that since he came from Earth, he should know better than you just how terrifying those fanatical groupies are. It was clear that because of the war with the two empires, he, as the chairman of the new flyer, had become the most famous person on the signs. He could be considered a superstar. In this world where information was far from being developed, it was natural for a superstar like him to be publicly announced, creating a stir. Su Yi had expected this before, but he never thought that the people of this world would chase after stars. They weren't any worse than the fans on Earth. They were even more fanatical. We can't keep going like this. Count Belmo, send out a notice. Say that my press conference is only open to the invited reporters of the major newspapers. The others don't need to participate, and ask them to leave. Count Belmo looked at Su Yi with a strange expression before shaking his head. Chairman Su, do you believe that if I go out and say this to them, I will be immediately killed by the angry crowd? Is it that exaggerated? Yes, it's that exaggerated. Count Belmore said resolutely. So your meaning is, you want me to say it? Su Yi pointed at himself. Count Belmo's expression instantly softened, and there was even a pleading look in his eyes. Chairman Su, if I could do it, how could I trouble you to personally come out? But you can also see that these people have already lost their minds, so I really don't have the confidence to control the situation without any casualties. So, I can only trouble you with your abilities. Su Yi looked at the wild crowd in the city square outside the window and gave a bitter laugh. All right, This can be considered reaping what you sow. After saying this, Sui opened the window and instantly flew over Banta City Square. Chapter 1141. According to the experience he had on Earth, Sui was very clear that if he appeared in front of everyone like this, it would cause a riot. If it was even more serious, it would cause a stampede that could cause injuries. So he wasn't in a rush to show himself. He used the magic communicator to contact the staff of the new flyer in the city square and gave them his orders. After a while, the 4 large magic illusion projectors around the city square and the several hundred smaller magic illusion projectors that had been placed on the streets of Banta City over the years, as well as the magic illusion projectors outside Banta City's old city. Suddenly, the same scene appeared at the same time. It was Sui's full body. At the same time, Sui's figure appeared on the screens of the several hundred magic illusion projectors, attracting the attention of the crowd. Everyone looked at the magic illusion projectors in a daze. It was unknown who shouted a few times, but the crowd immediately broke out in cheers and shouts. The sound waves even shook the houses around the city square, making Sui flying in the air unable to help being shocked. He never thought that just by showing himself through the magic illusion projectors, it would cause such a large reaction. It was a good thing he didn't rashly appear in front of everyone. Otherwise, there might have been serious consequences. This was Sui's first time being cheered by so many people in his life, so he couldn't help feeling a bit smug. But he immediately calmed down, and after pausing, he raised his hands. With his actions, Sui on the screens of the hundreds of magic illusion projectors in the city square, in the old city, and outside the old city also made the same action. That's right, this was a live broadcast. With Sui's help, the Frestec Chamber of Commerce and the New Moon Chamber of Commerce's Magic Illusion Projector Research Department had made a breakthrough in this area at the end of last year. With the support of the New Moon Chamber of Commerce, they had made a live broadcast reality. Although this live broadcast required the target to be in a recording environment, because Sui was an archmagus, he only needed to use a magic illusion array of the same frequency as himself to create a live broadcast environment. Just like the live broadcasts on Earth, Sui's every action would be projected on the screens of the hundreds of magic illusion projectors. Hello everyone, I am Sui. I am currently sending my greetings through the New Moon Chamber of Commerce's live broadcast. Sui greeted everyone with a smile. His voice was immediately sent out by the magic illusion projectors, clearly ringing in the ears of everyone in Banta City. After the crowd was stunned for a bit, they immediately reacted and erupted in cheers and shouts that were even louder than before. Sui silently waited for around 2 minutes before the crowd gradually calmed down. Everyone, I'm very happy that everyone is willing to come to my personal press conference. Sui continued. But I think that everyone can see that because there are too many people here, this small Banta City can't hold them all. I even saw that many people find it hard to even stand straight. Everyone looked at each other and found that they were all twisted because of the crowd, so they couldn't help laughing. They didn't notice it when they were desperately trying to squeeze into the city square, but now that Sui reminded them, everyone realized just how crazy they were. I'm very happy that everyone likes and cares about me. But due to the current situation, it's clearly impossible for everyone to come to my personal press conference. Sui continued. So, I'm very sorry to tell everyone that for this personal press conference, only the invited reporters from the various newspapers can come. Other than this, please listen to the orders of the city guards and leave the old city. Hearing this, everyone was first stunned before they began to cause a ruckus. Almost everyone revealed looks of dissatisfaction. Based on what? That's right. Based on what can those reporters participate, and we can't? We also want to see Chairman Sui and hear what Chairman Sui has to say. Right, the city square isn't for those reporters. Can't we just go in and sit? I definitely won't leave. Me too. Seeing the angry appearance of the crowd in the distance, Count Belmore, who was watching the situation from the city lord's manor, couldn't help wiping his cold sweat. This Chairman Sui, couldn't he be a bit more tactful with his words? Could it be that he didn't know that being this direct would only cause people to be dissatisfied? When Count Belmore was prepared to send more troops to stabilize the situation, Sue, he spoke again. In order to make up for everyone's losses, our Frestec Chamber of Commerce has set up live broadcast stations in the squares outside the Old City District. After everyone leaves the Old City District, not only can you continue watching my press conference through the large-scale magic illusion projector, you can also receive some gifts from our Frestec Chamber of Commerce's staff. These gifts are divided into several grades. The lowest is a Shinfei brand magic fan, and the highest is a new magic sedan. Because the gifts are limited, those who come first have a chance to win the grand prize. Everyone looked at Sue E, who had a fox-like smile on the screen in a daze and didn't know what to do. This was their first time hearing about this so-called reward event. Moreover, the lowest grade prize was a Shinfei brand magic fan, and the highest grade was a magic sedan. The new flyer was actually this generous? The hesitation in most people's hearts lasted for less than half a minute before it turned into a desire for the prize. It was about to enter the hot summer season, so if they could obtain a magic fan, it would without a doubt make the summer much better. Even if they didn't use it, they could sell this free Shinfei brand magic fan and get 1 or 2 gold coins. If their luck was a bit better and they received an even better gift or even the highest grade magic sedan, the crowd surged again, but this time they didn't move towards the city square. Rather, they moved out of the old city. Count Belmore looked at Sue, who came back from Shinfei in a daze, and only after a while did he say something. Chairman Sue, did you already plan this? Of course not. Sue, he shook his head. If I had already planned this, there wouldn't have been this kind of situation today. Then the gift-giving event you mentioned just now, this is an exhibition that our company has already planned ahead of time. It's used to warm up for the upcoming summer season. Now I just need to have the company's staff change the items that were originally for the exhibition into gifts. There isn't any difficulty at all. You can be assured. I believe in the abilities of your new flyer staff. Only, Count Belmore licked his lips, not knowing what kind of expression he should make to express his thoughts. Only Chairman Sue, you actually solved this crisis this easily and even helped your new flyer advertise. This really makes me admire you. Sue laughed and waved his hand. It's just a small matter. It's not that big of a deal. Perhaps it is a small matter to Chairman Sue, but to me, it is a good lesson. Originally, I thought that to deal with these people who have almost lost their minds, I could only use violence to suppress them, but I didn't expect to be like Chairman Sue, paying a little bit of benefit and coaxing them. Oh, persuading them all to leave, it really opened my eyes. Sue, he was too lazy to care about the word coax that Count Belmore mentioned, because to be honest, this method wasn't much different from coaxing. The only difference was that coaxing didn't have to pay any real benefits, while Sue paid some insignificant real benefits. As for Belmore, Count Belmore's praise, he didn't dare to accept it. In the end, he only learned part of the experience from similar group events on Earth. Count Belmore didn't think of this method because to the nobles of the signs, the commoners weren't worthy of being treated seriously, so they naturally only needed to use violence to suppress them. Although the crowd in the old city quickly left because of Sue Yi's small promise of a gift, there were still this many people, and it would take quite a bit of time for them all to leave. It wasn't until 11 o'clock in the morning, an hour and a half past the scheduled time of the press conference, that the crowd in the old city retreated and returned to normal. However, this normal state didn't include the city square. In this huge square with more than 10,000 square meters, it was still full of people. With a casual glance, there should be close to 10,000 people. It seems that not everyone is willing to leave. Count Belmore pointed at the crowd on the city light and sighed. Chairman Sue, do we need to drive away those irrelevant people? That's not necessary, as long as the press conference can be held normally. Sue, he shook his head and glanced at Count Belmore. Count Belmore understood and made an inviting gesture to Sue. The two went downstairs together, walked out of the city lord's mansion, and walked toward the city square about 500 meters away from the gate of the city lord's mansion. As soon as the two walked out of the gate of the city lord's mansion, they immediately attracted the attention of countless people. More than 10,000 people in and around the city square were all focused on Sue E. It could be said that he was truly the center of attention. At this time, a tall figure strode out from the city square and came to Sue E with a big smile. He opened his arms and hugged him tightly. Chapter 1142. Hey, old friend, I called you all the way here today. Sister-in-law Ria wouldn't blame me, right? After letting go, he spoke with a smile. To be called an old friend by other than Heinz, who had founded the New Flyer with him. Who else could it be? Hearing Suyi's question, Heinz broke out in laughter. Ria already found me annoying at home, so she chased me out early in the morning. Oh, then aren't you homeless today? Yi joked while looking over Heinz. Because Heinz had spent most of his time with Ria in a secluded valley outside Banda City after retiring, he wasn't willing to be disturbed by others. Adding in the fact that Yi was normally very busy and rarely came to Banda City. The last time he saw him was already 2 years ago. Now that they were meeting again after 2 years, Yi found that although Heinz's hair was a bit whiter and the wrinkles on his face were a bit deeper, his overall appearance wasn't bad. He looked very healthy, which made him feel much more assured. Heinz was almost 70 this year, which for signs who had a low lifespan was already considered very old. To be able to maintain such a physical and mental state at this age, the biggest contribution was that he was much richer than the average person and had enough conditions to protect his body. Of course, this money came from his shares in the New Flyer. After the two exchanged a few more words, they walked to the stage that had been set up in the center of the city square. The countless reporters gathered in the city square saw this scene, and they all lowered their heads to write. Today was Yi's first time holding a press conference, so it must be an event with great news value and historical significance. In this event, Heinz, who was a true senior member of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce, as well as another major shareholder, had a very special meaning, so naturally it was worth recording. Heinz's appearance made the reporters even more curious about this press conference. If this was really Yi's personal press conference, why did he also invite Heinz? Everyone's eyes were focused on Yi, who had already sat down in the chair in the sky, waiting for him to speak. Yi looked around and confirmed that his image was projected on the 4 large magic illusion projectors around the city square. With a faint smile, he casually cast a sound amplification spell. Hello everyone, I am Yi. I welcome everyone to this press conference that I'm holding in my name. Seeing that Yi deliberately paused, the reporters under the stage immediately gave thunderous applause. Yi's heart filled with joy. Although he had personally hosted a New Flyer product conference a long time ago, the New Flyer back then didn't receive as much attention as it did now, so the response was naturally far from what it was now. After the applause calmed down, Yi's eyes swept across the ordinary citizens around the city square and continued. To be honest, I expected this press conference to receive attention, but I didn't think it would receive this much attention. Originally, I only wanted to use this press conference to express some of my views. To put it bluntly, I just wanted to chat with everyone. The reporters under the stage were shocked. Chat? Even if Yi really just wanted to chat, with his identity as the president of the New Flyer, any word he said would have a very big impact. Especially in the magic machine industry, any action of a New Flyer would affect the development of the magic machine industry on the continent. There were countless countries and countless people that were focused on the New Flyer, watching its every move. Yi, as the president of the New Flyer, even if he said something that wasn't important, it would be analyzed by the other countries and people of the continent, understanding the meaning behind it. So even if Yi casually said that he was just chatting, in the eyes of others, they definitely wouldn't think of it this way. But before expressing my views, what I want to do first is to reminisce a bit. Yi said. The reporters under the stage revealed knowing smiles at the same time. Not a single person was surprised. When Yi announced that he would be holding a press conference today, there were many newspapers that had analyzed this matter in detail. Very quickly, there were many newspapers that had deduced some things. Why did Yi choose today to hold this press conference in Banda City and not in Xinfei City? The answer was very simple. It was because the 18th of June was the day the New Flyer was established, and Banda City was where the New Flyer was established. The reason why Yi had invited Heinz, who had been in seclusion for many years, was clearly to commemorate this point. As expected, Sue turned to look at Hines before continuing with a smile. 23 years ago, Hines and I established the New Flyer in Banna City. Now that 23 years have passed, the New Flyer has already become a company with some fame in the signs, which makes me very happy. I chose this day and chose to hold this press conference in Banna City because I wanted to use this special day to reminisce about the days of 23 years ago. After saying this, Sue suddenly revealed a self-deprecating smile. Some people say that once a person starts reminiscing about the past, it means that they are old. Indeed, the New Flyer has been established for 23 years, and even I am almost 50 years old, so I am indeed old. Everyone under the stage looked at Sue on the stage with strange expressions. Sue had a head of bright black hair, and there wasn't a single wrinkle on his face. His eyes were bright, his skin was rosy, and his lips were strong. No matter how one looked at it, he was at most a young man in his early 30s. Compared to Hines, who had a head of silver hair, wrinkles, and age spots, Sue was simply too young. If he didn't take the initiative to mention it, no one would have thought that he was a middle-aged man who was about to turn 50. Of course, this was all because Sue had already become an archmagus. It said that the moment a magician became an archmagus, they would grasp the truth of magic in this world. Because of this, their lifespan would be greatly increased, and they could even keep their youth forever. However, if a normal magician could become an archmagus, they would be at least 50, 60, or 70 years old. Even if they became an archmagus at this time, they would already look like an old man. However, Sue was different. He had become a great magician in his early 30s and an archmagus in his 40s. In addition, he had always maintained his appearance well, allowing him to maintain his youthful appearance. According to rumors, Sue had a good relationship with the elves. It was said that he had received a special blessing from the elves, allowing him to obtain part of the elves' secret of longevity. This allowed him to live longer than most archmagi and maintain his youthful appearance. This point was proven by the fact that Sue's wives maintained their youthful and beautiful appearances. If it weren't for all these special conditions, even if Sue didn't look like a middle-aged man nearing 50 and show obvious signs of old age, he wouldn't look so young. Of course, this was something that no one could be envious of. Disregarding everything else, there were only 22 people on the continent who could become an archmagus. Although I'm old, my heart hasn't aged. Sue ignored the strange expressions of the people below the stage and continued with a smile. For a person, 23 years is a long time. It can be considered a third of one's life. However, for a merchant guild, this is only the beginning. New Flyer is only 23 years old now. In my eyes, it is only the beginning. It still has an extremely long lifespan, perhaps 100 years, or a few hundred years, or even 1,000 years. The reporters below the stage looked at each other and hesitated for a moment before recording Sue's words. With New Flyer's current state, there wouldn't be many people who would object to calling it the largest merchant guild on the continent. However, New Flyer was still an exceptionally young merchant guild. Just as Sue had said, 23 years was only the beginning for a merchant guild. Although New Flyer's current development was very good, no one could guarantee that it would continue to develop steadily in the coming days. As Sue had said, it had a history of over 100 years, or even a few hundred years, or even a few thousand years. This was an unknown. There were many factors that affected New Flyer's development, and the most important one was that Sue would truly grow old one day, or even die. When Sue was no longer around, would New Flyer still be able to choose the most correct path of development and develop steadily and quickly like it had in its 23 years of history? Looking at Sue, who had become slightly emotional after talking about the history of New Flyer's development and hearing him describe the difficulties and dangers that New Flyer had encountered over the years, the reporters below the stage all had their own thoughts. Most of the reporters weren't very interested in the history of New Flyer's 23 years of development because it had already been thoroughly researched by countless people on signs, and there were almost no secrets to speak of. There were even people who wrote a book to introduce and analyzed this point. The final conclusion was that a large part of the reason why New Flyer could develop to its current state was because of Su Yi. If it wasn't for Su Yi's unimaginable foresight that led New Flyer to develop ahead of time, New Flyer definitely wouldn't have become what it was now. Therefore, what everyone was most concerned about was Su Yi himself. Su Yi had just mocked himself by saying that he was already old. Then, had he considered what New Flyer would do if he really became old? Chapter 1143. Su Yi's nostalgia for the past did not last long. He pulled Hines aside and talked about some trivial things that happened when the New Flyer was founded 23 years ago, leaving a lot of room for the reporter's imagination. Then, he ended the nostalgic time. All right, the time for the old people is over. The reporters all burst into laughter, then focused their attention and stared at Su Yi with their eyes wide open. They knew that it was finally time for the main topic of the day. Next, let's get into the main topic of today's press conference. Actually, like I said just now, I want to have a chat with everyone. Su Yi paused for a moment, his eyes sweeping across the audience. Seeing that all the reporters, including the uninvolved civilians, were looking at him attentively, he nodded with satisfaction. When I was young, my teacher told me that when I was chatting with people, it's best to have a clear idea of what I want to talk about this time, so that I can have a clear conversation. So, before we officially start the chat, I want to confirm the main idea of this chat and share it with everyone. The reporters all picked up their pens and paper, ready to take notes at any time. There's only one main idea, and that is to discuss with everyone what magic represents in my mind. But regarding this main idea, there are a few topics that I will talk about separately. The first one is about magicians. I think that in your minds, or perhaps in the minds of most people on the Signs continent, most of your understanding of magicians is that they're people who control mysterious magic and have strong destructive might. Just like this, Su Yi flipped his palm, and everyone immediately felt that something was wrong. They all looked up and saw that the sky had turned into a glaring fiery red, as if a meteor would fall at any time. Most of the reporters below the stage were knowledgeable, and soon, some of them shouted in surprise. Heavenly fire descends. This is a forbidden fire spell. Hearing the cries of surprise, Su Yi smiled and retracted his hand. The red clouds in the sky instantly retreated, and everything returned to normal. Magicians have great power, great destructive power, and can even decide the outcome of a war. So in the eyes of many, magicians bring fear and panic. This is not strange at all. But in my opinion, this is a completely different matter. Su Yi flipped his palm again, this time condensing a small fireball in his palm. Magicians do have great power, but this power can't only be used for destruction, right? At this time, a New Flyer employee beside him took out a frying pan from nowhere and placed it flat on top of the fireball in Su Yi's palm. The temperature of the fireball was very high, and steam was produced from the heat of the frying pan. Then, another employee carried a pot of oil in one hand. He first poured some oil into the frying pan, and then he skillfully cracked the eggs. A moment later, the two fresh and tender poached eggs were cooked, and a trace of fragrance wafted from the high platform. The reporters below the stage looked at the situation on the stage in shock. Their faces were full of confusion. What was Su Yi doing? In front of all these people, he was trying to use magic to fry eggs? Su Yi took a bowl from the employee and placed the two eggs in the bowl. Then he raised the bowl to show the people below the stage. You all must be very curious as to why I would do this. Actually, if you were in school and you were hungry in the middle of the night, but because there was no stove, you couldn't make anything to eat, then you would understand why I would do this. The people below the stage had strange expressions. After all this time, this was related to Su Yi's school experience? Which school did Su Yi go to before? It seemed to be an unknown school called the Sun Kaiser School. Don't laugh. The first time I realized that magic didn't have to be used for destruction and could be used for other things, I was inspired by the experience of frying eggs in the dormitory. It wouldn't be exaggerated to say that the appearance of the first magic fan and the establishment of the New Flyer, as well as the appearance of more magic machines, all originated from these two fried eggs. Hearing Su Yi's explanation, the people below the stage finally understood. The reporters quickly recorded this down. This was a very newsworthy topic related to the new flyer. It was enough to write a large article. After this incident, I discovered that magic can also be used for other more meaningful things. This led me to make more associations, and then I did more research in this area. When I was studying in the academy, I had already made a lot of strange magic tools. Only no one cared about these things at that time, until I came to Banna City and made the first magic fan. As for the development of the new flyer, I don't need to say much. I think everyone is clear on this. What I want to say is that through this matter, as well as the use of the various magic machines that the new flyer developed, it proves my point that magic shouldn't only be used for destruction. The value of a magician shouldn't only be used for destruction and deterrence, so it shouldn't be used on the battlefield. A reporter under the stage suddenly raised his hand. Su Yi looked over and found that it was a reporter from the Banna Times, so he nodded to him. That reporter quickly stood up and asked in a loud voice, "Chairman Su, is this the reason why your new flyer worked with the two empires and the two magician organizations to issue the Magicians' Peace Treaty?" "Yes." Su Yi nodded with a serious look. "In my opinion, magicians have such a mysterious thing like magic, but they use it for destruction and war. This is simply a waste of the talent that the heavens have given us. So I hope that magicians won't keep doing this and should use their talent for things that benefit others." "Then do you think that the thing that benefits others is to enter the magic machine industry and research magic machines?" That reporter asked. "No, the thing that benefits others is not limited to magic machines. There are many other things that can be done. But based on the current situation, researching magic machines is the most efficient and most fruitful method. What do you think?" So he asked back. That reporter and the other reporters under the stage fell into deep thought. They had to admit that Su Yi was right. The magicians of the signs hadn't considered this matter before, so naturally they didn't know how to use magic to benefit others. Now that Su Yi and his new flyer had provided the new magic machine industry, it could be considered a perfect solution to this problem. So naturally, it was the best method without a doubt. Seeing that the reporter had sat down and stopped asking questions, Su Yi continued, "Let's return to the topic of understanding magicians. To most people, magicians represent destruction, but to me, every magician is a precious talent that has the potential to become a researcher or engineer for the Chamber of Commerce. To others, a magician's value is determined by his level of magic and the power of his magic. But to me, what determines his value is his deep understanding of magic, as well as his creativity in the application of magic. Speaking of which, let's move on to the second topic, and that is, what exactly is magic?" If the people under the stage still had some confusion on their faces when the first topic was brought up, then when the second topic was brought up, the people under the stage were all focused and listening attentively. Su Yi was now one of the strongest magicians on the continent, and according to rumors, he had once defeated several magicians from two empires. He was even hailed as the strongest magician on the continent. The analysis of magic that came out of his mouth was undoubtedly very valuable. Actually, this topic is for the magicians on the continent. Of course, it's impossible for me to gather all the magicians on this continent and have them listen to my lecture. Therefore, I've gathered all the reporters from the newspapers in hopes that you can spread my words to all the magicians on the continent through the major newspapers. The reporters below the stage all revealed a proud smile. Su Yi placing such importance on them naturally made them feel honored. Thinking of the first newspaper on the continent, the Banna Times, that was also here, was personally founded by Su Yi. These reporters felt a sense of closeness towards Su Yi. However, Su Yi's expression suddenly became serious. Because the following words are mainly for the magicians of the continent, I want to make a serious request to you. I don't want you to make any changes to these words, and you have to publish them in the major newspapers without missing a single word. There can't be a single mistake. Do you understand what I mean? The faces of the reporters under the stage turned cold, and they quickly took back the smiles on their faces. Although Su Yi's words were a bit overbearing, with his powerful strength and prestige, adding in the fact that the new flyer far surpassed the status of the major newspapers. There wasn't a single newspaper that dared to go against his request. But when Sui said that not a single word could be changed, the reporters were excited. Sui had given this serious order, which meant that what he was about to say was very important. Moreover, Sui had said that these words were for all the magicians on the continent. So as long as these words were published, it would attract the attention of all the magicians. Even those noble magicians were paying attention, so naturally normal people would be even more curious. Like this, would they need to worry about the sales of the newspaper? After understanding this, all the reporters' eyes lit up as they looked at Sui. Chapter 1144. It's not polite to say that most of the magicians on the continent don't understand what magic is at all. Sui's first words made the crowd fall into a deathly silence. Whether it was the reporters or the citizens on the side, they all looked at Sui in shock, looking like they didn't dare believe this. This Sui, did he know what he was talking about? Even if he was the peak archmagus on the continent and could defeat many archmagi, being called the strongest magician on the continent by many people, he couldn't be this arrogant, right? Saying that most magicians didn't understand what magic was? Could it be that only he understood? After the shock, the crowd under the stage became noisy. The reporters whispered to each other, expressing their different understandings of Sui's words. However, no matter who it was, they all felt that Sui's words were too excessive. It really wasn't something that should be said in public. The reporter from the Banta Times who asked the question didn't even raise his hand as he stood up to ask Sui in a loud voice. Chairman Sui, what do you mean by this? What do I mean? Of course it means what it means. Sui naturally replied. The crowd fell into silence again. That reporter was quite choked up by Sui's words. After pausing, he continued to ask, Chairman Sui, can I understand this as you looking down on the magicians of the continent? Sui couldn't help smiling. The Signs newspaper industry had only developed for over 10 years. It was much worse compared to Earth, but these reporters had learned how to dig holes. Even if it was a reporter from the Banta Times, that should be closer, he wasn't polite at all. However, it was like he didn't hear the meaning in the reporter's words at all as he nodded with a smile. Yes, I'm looking down on them. This answer was like throwing a flame into a pot of oil, instantly causing the restless atmosphere under the stage to explode. For a moment, countless noises rang out, causing the huge city square to become a pot of chaotic porridge. Sui kept a smile on his face as he looked at the chaotic reporters below the stage. He thought to himself that these guys really reacted as he had expected. Heinz on the side also looked at Sui in surprise. Although he had worked with Sui for many years and knew that this fellow would often have strange ideas and say things that people found unbelievable, he was still very surprised by what he said just now. He knew very well that Sui was not an arrogant person. On the contrary, he was very calm at all times. He could clearly judge the situation from all sides and then weigh the pros and cons. Therefore, if it wasn't necessary, he shouldn't have said something that would cause many people to be dissatisfied. But what was the need for him to say these words? Perhaps feeling Heinz's gaze, Sui turned around and gave him a slight smile. Then he reached out and patted the back of Heinz's hand, indicating that he could rest assured. Heinz instantly felt his mood calm down. Sui had this kind of charm. He could always give people enough confidence to make others believe that his choice and approach were correct. And for so many years, although his choice and approach might have puzzled everyone at first, in the end, he had never disappointed anyone. So, Heinz sat back down and calmly looked at the chaotic reporters below the stage. He quietly waited for Sui's next move. After a moment, the reporters seemed to have reacted. Dozens of reporters stood up at the same time, and even more reporters raised their hands at the same time. Chairman Sui, what you said. Chairman Sui, I think you. Chairman Sui. A lot of questions blurted out, but Sui just waited quietly for a while. Then, he smiled and raised his hand to quiet the crowd again. I know that you must have a lot of doubts about my words, and that is understandable. But I don't plan to answer the questions one by one. So please sit down and wait for me to continue. The reporters who had already stood up looked at each other and sat down one by one. The reporters who had raised their hands also put their hands back down one by one. Everyone's eyes once again focused on Sue-yi, waiting for his answer with rapt attention. You reporters may only feel puzzled, but I believe that after hearing what I said, the other magicians on the continent are not puzzled but dissatisfied. The reporters below the stage couldn't help but roll their eyes at Sue-yi. Nonsense. You're openly looking down on other magicians. Are you not allowing them to be dissatisfied? But no matter how dissatisfied my fellow magicians on the continent are, I still insist on my point of view. The majority of magicians don't understand magic at all, and that is the truth. Sue-yi's unyielding tone gave the reporters a jolt. Of course, they knew that Sue-yi wasn't crazy. There must be a reason for him to say this. When it comes to understanding magic, on the battlefield before, I had a discussion with the archmagi of the two empires, and we came to a conclusion. The magic theories that have been passed down for thousands of years on the Signs continent are already outdated and can't be used in this new era. From now on, we need to establish a brand new theoretical system of magic and use a different method to understand and research magic. Hearing that Sue-yi had actually discussed this problem with the archmages of the two empires on the battlefield, the reporters below the stage were first stunned, then came to a realization. No wonder Sue-yi dared to say such mocking words in front of everyone. It turned out that he'd already discussed his point of view with the archmages of the two empires, and it looked like he'd obtained the approval of those archmages. If this was the case, then Sue-yi's point of view had already obtained the approval of almost half of the archmages on the continent. At the same time, apart from Sue-yi, New Flyer also had two archmages in Minter Carmilla and Salader Cray the Sorcerer. Sue-yi's point of view would obviously obtain their approval. In this way, Sue-yi had obtained the approval of more than half of the archmages. The archmages naturally had an unparalleled guiding significance to the other magicians on the continent. If the archmages had approved of this point of view, no matter how unconvinced the other magicians were, they didn't have the courage or capital to resist. At most, they could only curse in their hearts while seriously studying the point of view that the archmages had thrown out. The so-called change of method isn't as simple as changing some magical materials, magical containers, or magical attributes. It's as simple as, Sue-yi pointed at his own head, changing the way one views magic. What is magic? It sounds mystical and mysterious when studied, but at the end of the day, magic is just a tool. It's no different from the shovels and scissors in the hands of ordinary people. The expressions of the people below the stage became strange once again. Comparing magic to a shovel and scissors? Wasn't this lowering the level of magic too much? Only by understanding how magic is formed can one use it correctly. This is the mentality that we, as magicians, must maintain when studying magic. As for the specifics, it shouldn't be described with vague words like feeling, perception, general, and so on. It should be more specific, like how many magical elements there are in a certain magic, how dense it is, and how much tension there is between the magical elements. Only by understanding these questions can one be considered to truly understand magic. As for the new method of magic research, I proposed a brand new name when I discussed it with the archmages of the two empires. It's called the scientific view of magic, which is to use a scientific approach to studying magic and not an emotional one. What is science? I won't explain too much here. If you want to know, you only need to look at the magic machines that New Flyer produces to know a thing or two. And to study magic with a scientific attitude, we have to study every magic spell to the same degree as the magic machines produced by our Chamber of Commerce. We have to be precise, and meticulous, without any errors or vague definitions. Only then can we be considered to have truly studied magic thoroughly. But this is still far from enough. Right now, apart from our New Flyer, there is no such thing as a true theoretical system of magic in the signs. Therefore, I hope that all the magicians on the continent can learn how to study magic scientifically in the coming days and learn how to use magic scientifically. Take note, when I say study magic, I don't mean for everyone to study how to increase the destructive power of magic, because that's meaningless. What I hope for everyone to study is how to use magic to make people's lives more convenient. According to the internal division of New Flyer, we should pay more attention to the use of magic in the civilian world. To be honest, I've always felt that many of the magicians on this continent are very stupid, or rather, very selfish. The vast majority of the people on this continent are still in a situation where they can't even fill their stomachs. Yet these magicians, who possess power that far surpasses that of ordinary people, only know how to desperately study magic all day long, and bully and even slaughter ordinary people. Don't you feel ashamed of this? I hate this, so I'd rather spend a lot of effort to chase all the magicians away from the battlefield, forcing everyone to study things that can improve the lives of ordinary people, and forcing everyone to enter the magic machine industry. As for what New Flyer, or rather what I hope the magic machine industry should look like and what it should do, that is the third topic I want to talk about today. This topic is, what is our goal? Chapter 1145, The Goal of the New Flyer? Some of the reporters below the stage were confused, while others were shocked. This topic could be big or small, and it all depended on what Sui said. Regarding the goal of the New Flyer, perhaps in the eyes of many people, this is something that doesn't need to be discussed or explained. Because in the end, we are just a merchant guild. And as a merchant guild, our goal is, of course, to make money. That's right. I admit that the original intention of establishing the New Flyer was to make money. Even now, I have always emphasized that I am a merchant. The reporters below the stage couldn't help but roar with laughter. The confirmation of Su Yi's identity had always been a controversial topic on the signs. At the beginning, Su Yi and the New Flyer weren't famous, so naturally no one cared about Su Yi's identity. But later on, when the New Flyer started to gain some fame, everyone discovered that the chairman of the Merchant Guild, Su Yi, was actually a pretty good mage. When Su Yi's rank as a mage wasn't that high, only a few people lamented that as a noble mage, he had to run off to run a merchant guild and felt that it was a pity that he was lowering his status. But when Su Yi's talent for magic gradually revealed itself, and his magic level rapidly increased, to the point that he became an adept mage in a few short years, and then a great mage in his early 30s, the controversy regarding Su Yi's identity immediately grew. The Sorcerer's Guild and the other mages on the continent generally believed that since Su Yi was a powerful great mage, he was first and foremost a mage. As for his identity as a merchant, it was only a side effect. Mages had always looked down on merchants, and this was a matter of course for many people. But Su Yi had always emphasized to everyone that he was only a merchant and that his identity as a mage was only a side effect. This undoubtedly made the Magicians Guild and the other magicians on the continent feel somewhat displeased. Su Yi was a great magician, but he always emphasized that he was only a merchant. What about the reputation of the magicians? How are the mages supposed to express their sense of superiority? Therefore, the magicians would always emphasize that Su Yi was a powerful magician and that he only opened the New Flyer to research magic machines. On the other hand, most commoners were more likely to accept Su Yi's identity as the president of the New Flyer as a merchant. This was because the various magic machines produced by the New Flyer were closely related to the lives of commoners. In the eyes of most commoners, they would rather have a mage like Su Yi who was willing to be a merchant. At the beginning of the debate, the magicians had the upper hand because they had a higher status in the signs. This was common knowledge. But as the Frestec Chamber of Commerce became more and more famous, their influence became more and more. When the entire continent talked about Su Yi, the first thing they thought of was his status as the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's chairman. There were many times that they completely ignored the fact that he was a powerful magician. When the news that Su Yi had become an archmage was released, the controversy surrounding Su Yi's identity once again escalated. There were still thousands of great magicians in the signs. It was barely acceptable that a great magician like Su Yi didn't care about his identity as a great magician, but there were only 20 or so archmages in the signs. If Su-yi, as an archmage, kept emphasizing his identity as a merchant and ignored his identity as a magician, then where would he place all the mages on the continent? How would they deal with this? However, Su-yi still insisted on his identity as a merchant, as if becoming an archmage wasn't a big deal in his eyes. This point of view was further reflected in the war with the two empires. The New Flyers guards used the ironclad truth to tell everyone that magicians were no longer able to determine victory or defeat on the battlefield. Afterwards, the New Flyer presided over the signing of the Magicians' Peace Pact, completely removing magicians from the battlefield. Thus, everyone understood that the identity of magicians was indeed nothing to Su-yi. What he truly cared about was his identity as the president of a New Flyer. I won't hide it from everyone. The New Flyer has earned quite a bit of money these past few years. In fact, in recent years, its annual net profit has exceeded 100 million gold coins. Below the stage, there was a sound of people sucking in cold air. Although everyone knew that magic machines were very popular in the signs, and that the New Flyer would definitely earn a lot of money, no one had thought that the New Flyer would make so much money. 100 million gold coins. This was a terrifying number that no one dared think of in their entire lives. Not to mention that this was just the net profit of the New Flyer in a single year. So to say, from the perspective of a merchant, I am already very successful, and the money I've earned is enough to guarantee that I don't have to worry about anything in my life. Then the question is, after earning enough money, what should I do? Everyone under the stage revealed looks of understanding. Su-yi's topic had without a doubt reached the height of his life goal. With his current status and wealth, it was normal for him to consider this problem. This meant that he was planning to achieve his life goal through the New Flyer. Then what was it specifically? After considering it for a long time, I thought of the situation when I first created the New Flyer. When I first created the New Flyer, the reason was that I wanted to make a magic fan to relieve the heat of the summer. After that, our Shinfei company developed all kinds of magic machines, helping many people solve problems that had troubled them for many years. Among them, the one that made me the most satisfied and proud was the agricultural magic machine. Hearing Su-yi mention the agricultural magic machine, whether it was the reporters or the surrounding citizens, they couldn't help revealing a trace of respect as they looked at Su-yi. Su-yi was right. Of all the magic machines that the New Flyer had invented, the one that everyone welcomed and changed the lives of countless people was without a doubt the agricultural magic machine. Because of the appearance of the agricultural magic machine, the Lampari Kingdom's farming method had completely changed. The grain yield had greatly increased, and countless people no longer had to suffer from hunger. It could be said that it had completely changed the appearance of the Lampari Kingdom. Then, with the spread of the agricultural magic machine, there were countless countries that used the agricultural magic machine. With the fertilizer produced by the elves, it solved the food crisis of many countries. It made it so that there hadn't been any large-scale famine in the signs for many years. To countless people, not mentioning anything else, the New Flyer's move could be said to have surpassed all the other companies. There were even many people who called Su-yi the new savior. The agricultural magic machine is very good, but I feel that it is far from enough. To me, humans living in this world can't just be satisfied with eating, drinking, and wearing warm clothes. Apart from this, we should have some higher goals. Everyone under the stage looked at each other in blank dismay. Su-yi's words were a bit too much. For many people in the signs, being able to eat, drink, and wear warm clothes was already a wish that was hard to achieve. Even in the current signs, there were countless people who starved to death because they didn't have food, freezing to death in the cold wind. Su-yi being able to use the agricultural magic machine to increase the grain yield and solve the problem of food and clothing for countless people was already a great merit. Now, he was actually saying that humans should have higher goals. This was simply speaking without any pain. I know that you all have doubts about what I've said. Su-yi seemed to see through everyone's thoughts, so he continued with a faint smile. Indeed, to solve the basic problem of everyone's livelihood, it definitely isn't an easy matter. But New Flyer and I have always worked hard, and we will continue working hard in the future. I separated the sorcerers from the battlefield in the hope that they could devote themselves to something more beneficial to the development of the human race. Believe me, as long as there is enough time, it isn't that hard to solve the basic problem of food and clothing. The reporters under the stage had strange expressions, not knowing what kind of expression they should use to face Sue-E. In theory, Sue-E was right, but the situation in reality was very complicated. For the people of the signs, could they really develop themselves like he thought? Now we should talk about the topic I mentioned before. Sue-E suddenly looked up at the sky and fell into a daze for a while. The people under the stage curiously looked up with him, but they only saw a clear sky without a single cloud for 10,000 miles. After a while, Sue-E lowered his head and said, "Everyone, do you know what the land under our feet looks like?" Everyone looked at each other, and after a while, the reporter from the Banta Times tentatively raised his hand. Sue-E gave him a nod. "Chairman Sue, I remember that you once published an article in the Shinfei Magic Machine Industry Weekly discussing this problem. In that article, you said that what we are standing on is a giant sphere, and the signs is just a piece of land on this giant sphere. On this sphere, there's an endless sea. Am I right?" Without waiting for Sue-Yi's reply, there was an uproar under the stage. Among these reporters, there were many people who had read the Shinfei Magic Machine Industry Weekly, but there were few who had noticed that Sue-Yi had published this article. Even if there were people who had seen it, they would have thought that Sue-Yi's brain was cramping, which was why he would say this kind of nonsense. What kind of joke was this? There's a giant sphere under our feet. If it really was like this, wouldn't the people in the north have already fallen down? Sue-Yi noticed the different expressions of the people under the stage and revealed a faint smile. He thought that it wasn't easy for the people of this world to learn about astronomy and geography. But he had an advantage now, which was that with his status, no matter what he said, there would be people who would seriously listen and analyze it. "Yes, I did publish this article and said this." Sue-Yi gave a slight nod to the reporter from the Banta Times before indicating for him to sit down. "As for the planet under our feet, our Frestec Chamber of Commerce will have a voyage around the world to prove this to everyone." There was another uproar under the stage. The New Flyer was actually going to sail around the world? Although they didn't understand what this meant, just based on the name, they could tell that this was a large investment. Could it be that Sue-Yi was investing this much just to prove that there was a planet under everyone's feet and that this planet was round? Sue-Yi didn't care about the reactions of the people under the stage as he continued. "As for today, we are talking about something deeper. If everyone looks up, you should see the sun hanging high in the sky. Then if I told you that the sun is also a giant glowing planet, and it is countless times bigger than the planet under our feet, what would you think?" Everyone looked at Sue-Yi in a daze, not reacting at all. Chapter 1146. It had to be said, teaching astronomy and geography to people who didn't have any foundation was a very difficult matter. Sue-Yi spoke for a while on stage, but the reporters and the crowd were all stunned. Their heads were filled with confusion, not seeming like they understood at all. Of course, Sue-Yi didn't expect them to understand right now. The reason why he said all this was just to give these people a basic idea. After half an hour, Sue-Yi stopped. The crowd was silent for a while before the reporter from the Banta Times suddenly stood up. "Chairman Sue." As soon as he opened his mouth, he closed it again and had a hesitant look on his face. Sue-Yi nodded at him with a smile. "Just ask if you don't understand." That reporter hesitated for a while before shaking his head. It was like he had made a large decision as he asked, "Chairman Sue, you said that we are standing on a planet and the sun above us is an even bigger planet. Moreover, the planet under our feet should be revolving around the sun, and the stars in the night sky should be giant balls of fire like the sun. Although I don't understand these things, I feel that your words are quite reasonable. Only, where did you learn these things?" This question attracted the attention of everyone under the stage. That's right. Although the things Sue-Yi said sounded very powerful and opened everyone's eyes, understanding that the world they were in was a mysterious and colorful world. How did Su-yi know this? If I said that I accidentally obtained an ancient inheritance and obtained this knowledge, would you believe me? Su-yi asked back with a smile. That reporter from the Banta Times and the other reporters under the stage, as well as the surrounding citizens, all looked at Su-yi in a daze, with a "you're joking with me" expression. If there was an ancient inheritance, it was impossible for there to be no traces of it in the signs. Then again, why didn't Su-yi mention it before, and why did he say it all at once? Su-yi didn't expect anyone to believe his explanation at all. Without waiting for anyone to ask, he continued. As for how I obtained this knowledge, forgive me for not being able to reveal it, but I can guarantee that this knowledge is real and can be verified. The people under the stage looked at each other, and no one raised any objections. With Su-yi's current status, there was no need for him to make this kind of joke. Moreover, his description was very attractive, completely changing people's views of the world. If this world really was as big as Su-yi said, there would be a universe above their heads that they couldn't see the end of. How exciting would that be? Chairman Su, you suddenly mentioning these things. How is it related to the goal you mentioned? A reporter suddenly asked. Everyone was stunned for a moment before they reacted. That's right, Su, you've been talking for a while, but how is this related to the main topic he was talking about? Of course it's related. Su-yi smiled. Think about it. 20 years ago, people's understanding of this world stopped at signs. They thought that other than signs, there was only an endless ocean. But ever since our new Flyers Voyage fleet proved the existence of other continents, people realize that this world is much bigger than we imagined. Next, I will prove to everyone that we are indeed standing on a sphere, and there are several continents on this sphere. Each continent has different life forms and civilizations. When we have enough understanding of this planet, what I want to do next is to lead everyone to understand the starry sky above our heads. I want everyone to know that beyond the planet we're standing on, there's a world countless times bigger waiting for us to explore. Everyone followed Su-yi and looked up at the sky, but they could only see the blue sky due to the clear weather. They couldn't even see a single star, let alone the endless universe hidden behind the sky that Su-yi mentioned. The reporters realized that they couldn't keep up with Su-yi's train of thought anymore. What was he trying to say after talking for so long? Su-yi looked up at the sky again for a while before he slowly lowered his head. He looked at the thousands of reporters below the stage, at the confused civilians, and at Hines, who was looking at him in shock. He took a deep breath and opened his hands. The world is so big, but we still have to squeeze into a small place like signs and fight to the death for a little bit of benefit. Do you think it's meaningful? The reporters below the stage were stunned for a while before they all revealed bitter smiles. They had to admit that the world that Su-yi described was very beautiful and his questions were very powerful. But for the people of signs, especially the people who controlled most of the resources on signs, Su-yi's words were meaningless. Yes, this world didn't only have signs. It wasn't even just the planet under their feet. But what did this matter to them? What they could control right now were the resources on signs. With the technology of humans on signs, other than the new flyer, there were no other countries or organizations that could go to the legendary new continent. So how could they obtain the resources on that continent? Su-yi on stage revealed a smile, as his eyes were filled with understanding. In order for the people of signs to see the true appearance of the planet under our feet, I want to announce something here. After the planned trip around the world, our new flyer will be opening up the magic ship technology to all countries, organizations, and individuals. Our new flyer invites everyone to head to the new continent on this planet, inviting everyone to explore the planet under our feet. The noise under the stage fell silent, and the entire city square was filled with a deathly silence. However, this deathly silence only lasted for a few seconds before it exploded with a deafening noise. The surrounding citizens didn't have much of a reaction, but the reporters of the major newspapers all revealed looks of incomparable shock. If it was said that among the various technologies of the Shinfei Chamber of Commerce, The one that the other countries and organizations cared about the most was the military magic machine technology. Then the one that came in second was the magic ship technology. When the new flyer announced that they had discovered the new continent, all of signs had been stirred up. Everyone wanted to explore the new continent, but other than the Frestec Chamber of Commerce, no one else had a ship that could sail the seas. So everyone could only watch as the Frestec Chamber of Commerce explored the new continent. Now that Sue had announced that the new flyer would be opening up the magic ship technology, didn't that mean that other countries and organizations other than the new flyer, or even individuals, would have a chance to form a fleet and go to the other continent? Since the press conference had been held, it could be said that there was finally a big piece of news. After the reporters recovered from their initial shock, they all raised their hands or stood up to ask questions. Sue had a smile on his face as he answered the reporters' questions about the magic ship technology, while silently complaining in his heart. He had spent most of his time preparing and expressing his feelings, but in the end, these fellows didn't know what was good for them. They weren't interested in the new world he described. They were only interested in the technology that was about to be released. But this couldn't be blamed on them. After all, the people under the stage weren't like Sue who had transmigrated, grasping all the knowledge from Earth. Their knowledge of this world before the new flyer had appeared was limited to the small signs. The new flyer being able to discover the existence of the new continent was already a great shock to them. Now that they had to accept the new world that Sue had instilled in them, it was clearly too hard for them. Sue wasn't disappointed by this. The reporters under the stage were just microphones that he had specially found. They were responsible for spreading the ideas that he was talking about today. As long as the people of the continent knew what Sue was talking about and slowly accepted it, Sue would have achieved half of his goal today. He believed that after hearing the things that Sue was talking about, there would be people with foresight in the signs who would understand Sue's intentions and work hard according to Sue's plans. When the reporters finished asking the various questions about the magic ship technology transfer, the stage gradually fell silent. Sue looked over and said with a smile, "Everyone, I think that since I've already told everyone this much, everyone should understand what our goal is, right?" The reporters looked at each other with a trace of uncertainty in their eyes. Perhaps they could guess what Sue wanted to say, but there wasn't a single person who dared to believe it. "Our goal is actually very simple. It's the sea of stars above us." Sue pointed at the sky and said in a powerful voice, "The current us can only stay on this planet, but there will be a day when we will break through the sky above us and enter the boundless universe." The reporters looked at Sue in a daze, not knowing how to react. Everyone said that the new Flyers chairman Sue was a madman, but no matter how crazy a person was, he wouldn't say something like this, right? Break through the sky above us. Enter the boundless universe. They didn't even know how far the sky was. So Sue, he didn't know how far he was from his goal. Chapter 1147. It was the beginning of summer in early June. The streets of Doral were already unbearably hot under the bright sunlight. Lucian lowered his head to look at the resume in his hand. A drop of sweat rolled down from his forehead to his chin, and then dripped directly onto the resume. It happened to hit the words Phillips Academy, soaking the words until they were somewhat blurred. Staring at the line on the resume for a while, Lucian could not help but smile bitterly. Back then, in order to let him enter Phillip Academy to study, his parents had spent almost all of their savings for the past 10 years. After that, in order to pay for his tuition at Phillip Academy, which cost more than 50 gold coins a year, as well as his living expenses and other miscellaneous expenses, his parents had to wake up early and work late, working tirelessly every day. Their goal was nothing more than a hope that he could find a good job after graduating from Phillip Academy. But now, because he was about to graduate from Phillip Academy, he had come to Doral alone to seek a job after graduation. But he found that he could not find a satisfactory job at all. It was not that he could not find a job. Graduates like Lucian, who had graduated from Phillip Academy, which specialized in the magic industry, were all highly sought after. After he handed his resume around in the past 3 days, he immediately received enthusiastic invitations from more than 10 chambers of commerce. However, Lucian was not satisfied with the jobs provided by these chambers of commerce, because almost all of these jobs were directly related to the installation of magic arrays in the factories. In Lucian's opinion, this kind of job could be done by any mage who had a certain level of control over magic. It did not reflect his uniqueness at all. The ideal job in Lucian's mind was, of course, to enter the Academy of Magic in New Flyer. Like those distinguished researchers, he would study the most cutting-edge magic technology every day and come into contact with the most advanced magic machines every day. Only in this way would he be worthy of the 5 years of study in Philip Academy. Of course, Lucian was also very clear that the Academy of Magic in New Flyer was the most advanced magic research organization in science. With his current level, it was far from enough. But if he could not enter the Academy of Magic in New Flyer, he would have to at least join the research institutes of a few other large chambers of commerce. Therefore, Lucian had been spreading his resume everywhere these days. After discovering that this method didn't work, he focused his attention on the famous large chambers of commerce and specifically sought employment with them. However, even if these large chambers of commerce had openings in the Academy of Magic and wanted to recruit, their requirements were very high. They didn't look at Lucian, who had just graduated from the academy. Besides, Lucian wasn't a top student who graduated from a top college like the New Flight College. Naturally, he wouldn't attract much attention, so he had nothing to show for the past few days. If I still can't find a job, I'll have come here for nothing. Lucian sighed. He reached into his pocket and found that there were only 2 gold coins and a dozen silver coins left in it. This money might be enough for him to spend for a while in the small village in his hometown. But in Doral, the capital of the southern province of the empire, which was known as the most prosperous city in the south of the empire, it would not last for more than a few days. 2 days. If I can't find a suitable job in 2 days, even if I have to do the most boring work on the assembly line in the factory, I'll accept it. Lucian secretly gritted his teeth and made up his mind. If possible, he would like to say that it was fine if he couldn't find a job. At most, he would go back to the Philip Academy to continue his studies. Anyway, his grades in the academy had always been good. His tutor once told him that as long as he was willing to continue his studies for a few more years and get an advanced certificate from the Philip Academy, he could choose any large chamber of commerce's research institute after he graduated. Even the Academy of Magic in New Flyer was not impossible. But the reality made it impossible for Lucian to make this choice. The reason was simple. He had no money. The tuition fee and living expenses for the advanced courses in the Philip Academy were higher than the ordinary courses. It was already very difficult for Lucian's family to support him to complete the ordinary courses. Of course, they couldn't afford to continue his studies. Not to mention that Lucian's little brother was already 10 years old. So he should be entering the elementary school to study the basic courses, which also required money. If Lucian went out to work now, not only could he save a large amount of tuition fees, he could also earn money to help his little brother go to school and reduce the burden on his parents. No matter how one looked at it, this was a much better choice. In addition, although his parents didn't have that intention, Lucian himself actually hoped that his 12-year-old sister would also be able to enter the academy and study. She wouldn't be like those ordinary village girls who would casually find someone to marry when they reached a certain age and then live out the rest of their lives peacefully. These things required money, so Lucian couldn't continue his studies. He could only find a job after graduating this year. Although the work of drawing magic arrays on the assembly line was dull and boring, it was still much better than the income of ordinary workers. For example, Lucian's parents were currently working in a household magic machine factory in a small town near his hometown. They worked as the most simple workers and received around 10 gold coins a month, with a maximum of 15 gold coins. As for the 5 magic technicians in the factory who were responsible for drawing magic arrays, they received a minimum wage of 30 gold coins a month, and their other benefits were much better. Lucian's current idea was that if he couldn't find a suitable job in the last 2 days, he would return to Philip Academy to finish his studies before going to the factory to apply for a job. His parents had already told his situation to the boss of the factory, and the boss was very interested in Lucian. He immediately gave him a starting wage of 25 gold coins a month. As long as Lucian agreed, he could go to work at any time. But was it really decided like this? Lucian looked up and narrowed his eyes. Looking at the bright sun in the sky, there was a trace of unwillingness that filled his heart. Every day at Philip Academy, he was incomparably diligent in his studies, not daring to waste even a single minute. He had even cruelly rejected the confessions of 2 female classmates. Could it be that he wanted to return to his hometown after graduation and spend the rest of his life there? I'm not willing. Lucian tightly clenched his fists and took a deep breath. Although he only had 2 days left, he definitely wouldn't give up so easily. He was already luckier than many people. He had parents who were open-minded enough, willing to suffer hardships for him to finish his studies. So why couldn't he be even luckier now and find a satisfactory job in the last 2 days? As long as he performed a little better in the interview and fully displayed his excellence in the academy, there would definitely be a merchant association that would appreciate him. Lucian took a deep breath and cleared his mind of all the dejection and disappointment. Rousing his spirits, he lowered his head and prepared to continue forward. But just as he lowered his head, he suddenly saw a figure in front of him bump into him. Caught off guard, Lucian had no time to dodge and could only do his best to dodge. Bang! The 2 people's shoulders slammed into each other. That person staggered 2 steps before stabilizing himself. Lucian focused his eyes and found that the person who had suddenly bumped into him was a short, middle-aged man. It seemed that he had been hit quite hard and couldn't straighten up for a long time. Just as he was about to apologize, that person turned his head and glared fiercely at Lucian. "Kid, do you have eyes? Do you know how to walk?" Lucian admitted that he had walked with his head raised and was at fault. Hearing this, he could only smile apologetically and didn't retort. The man glanced at Lucian from head to toe and seemed to think that Lucian was taller and stronger than him. He snorted again and walked away. Lucian helplessly smiled bitterly, thinking that his luck today wasn't that good. At this time, his stomach let out a soft sound. He hadn't even eaten breakfast today. He had been busy the entire morning going to various merchant associations to apply for jobs and was now starving. Lucian rubbed his stomach and looked around. He chose a noodle shop on the corner that looked clean but was clearly not of high quality. 3 days ago, the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce announced to the public that they had made a major breakthrough in the research of magic signal transmission. According to the situation announced by Principal Avita, the new flyer is very likely to break through the distance limit of magic signal transmission and achieve limitless transmission without any obstacles. If this is realized, it will mean that the magic signal network on the continent will enter a new stage. Regarding this, the leaders of many countries and companies have expressed. As soon as he walked into the noodle shop, the sound coming from the small household magic illusion projector attracted Lucian's attention. Seeing the beautiful figure of Principal Avita of the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce that Lucian worshipped, Lucian's heart was filled with a strong sense of joy. God above, the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce was about to achieve limitless transmission of magic signals. If this was true, it would have an incomparably large effect on the magic machine industry on the continent. Just like the news said, this meant that the magic signal network on the continent would undergo an earth-shattering change and enter a new stage. Lucian's major at Philip Academy was magic signal transmission, so he had always paid attention to this information. He knew that the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce and many other countries and companies had been researching this technology, but in the end, it was New Flyer that had discovered first. Of course, this wasn't unexpected. New Flyer had a very solid foundation in the magic machine industry and magic science, so it would be strange if they weren't the first to discover it. Seeing Avita in the illusion talking to a large group of reporters with a gentle and noble temperament, Lucian couldn't help but sigh in admiration. If there is a day that I can reach the same position as Principal Avita, then I'm willing to die. Chapter 1148. No matter how envious he was, it wouldn't solve his stomach problem. Lucian looked at the illusion in a daze for a while, before casually finding a place to sit down and ordering the cheapest vegetarian noodles. While waiting for the noodles to be ready, he continued to watch the news being broadcasted by the magic illusion projector. After the news was broadcasted, the image on the illusion changed and showed a scene high up in the sky. At the bottom of the screen, there was a vast and majestic city. Lucian recognized at a glance that this city was the capital of the Kamla Empire, Wimbledon City. Lucian had never personally seen this great capital of the empire, but he often saw it in the news, so he was naturally very familiar with it. To be familiar with a place that he had never been to before, this was something that Lucian's parents didn't even dare to think about before. Take Lucian's parents, for example. The furthest they had ever been to was the third largest city in the province, about 50 kilometers away from their hometown. Other than that, not to mention Wimbledon City, they had never even been to the provincial capital. If nothing had changed in this world, they would be like Lucian's grandparents, who had never left their hometown and knew almost nothing about the outside world. However, New Flyer invented the magic signal transmission network and a magic illusion projector, while the New Moon Chamber of Commerce produced the corresponding magic illusion programs. This allowed them, who had never left their hometown, to understand the world without leaving their homes. It was precisely because of those programs about education that Lucian's parents made the decision to send Lucian to Philip Academy to study, even if they couldn't buy all kinds of new household magic machines every year like their neighbors. Their lives were much harder than before. So Lucian had always been very grateful to New Flyer and the New Moon Chamber of Commerce for giving him the opportunity to leave the isolated village in his hometown and see the world with his own eyes, giving him the opportunity to change his entire life. With the image of Wimbledon City in the sky, there's also a voiceover. The Empire's Royal Guards have recently shown a batch of new small magic attack boats that they bought from the Frestec Chamber of Commerce. It's reported that these small magic attack boats were developed by the Frestec Chamber of Commerce 3 years ago, representing the most advanced magic airships. They have a high speed of over 400 kilometers per hour, as well as being very flexible and having decent firepower. After being equipped with these new small magic attack boats, the battle strength of the Royal Guards in the air has without a doubt increased. This will increase the safety of Wimbledon City. There was a burst of cheers that came from the noodle shop. Lucian was surprised. He looked over the noodle shop and found that whether it was the owner or the people eating, they were all looking at the magic illusion projector on the wall with excited looks on their faces. Ah, this is great. With this thing, the Royal Guards will be much stronger than before. That's right. I've heard of this thing before. It said that it's New Flyer's most advanced magic airship. It flies very quickly, and you can't even see its shadow in the blink of an eye. Really? But the news said that its firepower isn't bad, I'm afraid. Are you stupid? How could the news be completely honest? This is related to the top secret of our Empire's army. How could it be casually revealed to others? Oh, that's right. Then based on this, hearing the discussions of the people around him, Lucian's lips twitched as he revealed a bitter smile. These fellows didn't know anything at all. What were they so excited about? The news had clearly stated that these small magic attack boats were developed by New Flyer 3 years ago. Then in these 3 years, even if New Flyer hadn't finished developing the new generation magic airship, they would have developed a new technology that could easily surpass these small magic attack boats. Then again, these things weren't the newest attack magic airships that the Frestec Chamber of Commerce had, nor were they the strongest. For example, the Thunder God level heavy magic airships that the Frestec Chamber of Commerce never sold were the true overlords of the sky. According to the rumors, in the internal practice of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce, the woven Thunder God level heavy magic airship could easily control the air. The other magic airships couldn't do anything to it. So as long as the other forces didn't have the same air power as the Thunder God level heavy magic airships, New Flyer would always control the air. Now everyone on the continent knew that in this new style of warfare, controlling the air was equal to controlling the initiative, which was very important in deciding the outcome of the war. Of course, This only existed in their imaginations and drills. In fact, on the current signs, there wasn't a single country or power that would go against New Flyer or even start a war with them, because that was seeking their own death. So when Lucian saw how excited the people around him were, because the royal guards were equipped with small magic attack boats, he was really speechless. Even if the battle strength of the royal guards, and even the entire Kamla Empire's army had greatly increased, even if the people of the Empire had 10 times the courage, would they still dare to casually start a war with New Flyer? You're saying that you won't challenge New Flyer and will start a war with the other countries. Stop joking, since New Flyer's chairman Sue E. made the famous Banna Declaration in Banna City 10 years ago, stating that their goal was to head to the Sea of Stars, deciding that the goal of the signs would be to develop the magic machine industry. There wasn't a single country that wanted to start a war. The first reason was that if there was a country that wanted to do this, the New Flyer guards would directly interfere and wouldn't allow the war to expand. The second reason was that the New Flyer was releasing technology related to the magic machine industry on a large scale, helping all the countries on the continent develop the magic machine industry. If there was a country that didn't rationally start a war, they would be eliminated by this era and would fall far behind the other countries. There wasn't a single country that dared take this risk. Even the Kamla Empire didn't dare. So when the royal guards suddenly announced that they were equipped with a batch of small magic attack boats, many people thought that it would increase the strength of the royal guards and the battle strength of the Empire's army. But for people like Lucian, who had a certain understanding of the magic machine industry on the continent, it would only be used to maintain the stability of the Empire. After all, the news had mentioned that there were several riots in the Empire that had attracted the attention of the Parliament. The royal guards announcing this might have been to deter these rioters. While the surrounding people were discussing this, the boss of the noodle house didn't stop what he was doing and quickly brought the bowl of noodles that Lucian had ordered over. Lucian was already very hungry at this time, so he ignored the laughable comments of the people around him and began to eat in big mouthfuls. While eating, he looked up from time to time at the magic illusion projector, listening to the sounds coming from it. After some current news, what came after was some news about people's livelihood. Lucian didn't care about these people's livelihood news because most of it wasn't related to him and he wasn't interested in this. But when it came to the entertainment news, he couldn't help looking up for a bit. This was because in this entertainment news, there was his favorite elven star, young Miss Lenore. Looking up at young Miss Lenore, who was as beautiful as a flower and had a noble aura that was a bit light, like she didn't belong to this world, Lucian couldn't help revealing an intoxicated look. The New Moon Chamber of Commerce had made many stars famous through their magic illusion programs, but Lucian didn't care about these stars that had nothing to do with his life. Only when he saw young Miss Lenore, it was like his heart was moved and he couldn't help paying attention to her. But Lucian was very clear that his world was too different from young Miss Lenore's, so they might never meet in this life. So he could only look at her through the magic illusion, and he was already satisfied. When the news about young Miss Lenore was over, Lucian came back to his senses. He looked down and found that the human uncle sitting in front of him was looking at him with a smile. His face couldn't help turning red as he quickly lowered his head to eat his noodles in large bites. Because he was eating in a hurry, he didn't notice that the broth was still very hot. He immediately choked and spat out a mouthful of broth on the table, looking as pitiful as he could possibly be. Lucian calmed down with great difficulty and found that his clothes were stained with the broth and the table was a mess. His face turned even redder. The uncle didn't seem to mind and only shook his head with a gentle smile. He handed a tablecloth to Lucian. Lucian quickly thanked him and hurriedly cleaned up the mess on the table. Looking at you, you should be a student of the academy, right? After Lucian sat down again, the uncle asked with a smile, "HM, how can you tell?" Lucian was stunned. The uncle chuckled. After a lot of experience, it's easy to see some things. It's not strange. After saying this, the uncle lowered his head and continued eating his noodles. He didn't have any intention of saying anything else. Lucian scratched his head, not understanding what was going on. Because of the small incident just now, Lucian found that he couldn't eat his bowl of noodles anymore. He could only call the boss over to pay the bill. "Sir, it's 15 silver coins." "Thank you." When Lucian saw the amiable smile on the boss's face, he couldn't help but curse in his heart. It's just a bowl of plain noodles, and it costs 15 silver coins? What a scam. The same bowl of noodles only cost 2 silver coins at most in his hometown. But when he remembered that this was Doral, Lucian could only sigh helplessly and put his hand into his pocket. Then his face changed drastically. Chapter 1149. There should have been his last 2 gold coins and a dozen silver coins in this pocket. But at this time, it had become empty with nothing left. Lucian touched it with his hand and even opened the pocket to take a closer look, but he didn't even see a shadow of a silver coin. He suddenly panicked. This was the only money he had left. If it was gone, he wouldn't even have enough money to go home, let alone continue to stay in Doral and look for suitable job opportunities. More importantly, he couldn't even pay for the dozen silver coins in front of him now. The noodle shop owner was naturally experienced and knowledgeable. Seeing Lucian's appearance, how could he not know what had happened? The smile on his face suddenly turned cold. "Sir, please pay the bill." Lucian squeezed the pocket. A trace of cold sweat slid down from his forehead, and thoughts ran through his mind. What should I do? What should I do? Seeing that Lucian was silent, the owner's face turned colder, and the tone of his voice became slightly higher. "Sir, you're not planning to dine and dash, are you?" The other customers in the noodle shop heard the noise and looked over. Seeing Lucian's slightly panicked expression, and then looking at his washed white clothes, the crowd immediately roared with laughter. "Haha, a little poor guy wants to come here to eat and drink. Boss, you're just unlucky. Boss, I know he doesn't have much money. I think you're going to pay for this bowl of noodles. Hey, this guy looks decent. How could he do such a shameful thing? Could it be that you're starving?" Listening to the people around him talking, Lucian's face turned red, but he couldn't find any words to refute. The fact was that he couldn't find any money to pay the bill. Naturally, he could only bear the cold face of the owner and the ridicule of the people around him. He frowned and thought for a moment. Then he gathered his courage and said, "Boss." As soon as he opened his mouth, the uncle sitting opposite him suddenly slapped the table. "Here's a gold coin. Pay for my share in front of this young man." Lucian was stunned. The owner glanced at the uncle, wiped his hand, and put away the gold coin on the table. Then he left. When the others saw that there was no more drama to watch, they all laughed and no longer paid attention to it. Thank you." Lucian's expression was a little awkward, but he was also a little excited as he hurriedly thanked the uncle. The uncle waved his hand and looked him up and down. "Looking at you, you don't look like a freeloader. Why? Are you in trouble?" Lucian calmed down and carefully thought about it. He quickly understood. It must be that wretched shorty who bumped into him on the road just now. He must have taken the opportunity to steal my money. Lucian was extremely remorseful. Before he left home, his parents had warned him countless times to be careful of thieves outside, but he didn't expect that he would still fall for it. If it weren't for this kind-hearted uncle helping him out, he would be lucky if he could get the boss to agree to pay the bill with his work. "I may have met a thief," Lucian explained with a wry smile. "Well, there are a lot of people in Doral, and there are a lot of thieves. I met one when I first came here, so it's not strange." The uncle nodded with a smile. He looked at Lucian again and continued to ask, "You should be a mage, right?" Lucian was stunned. "How did you know?" "I sensed the waves of magic on you." Seeing the surprised expression on Lucian's face, the uncle pointed to himself. "Don't be surprised. I'm also a mage, but my level is not high. I'm only a level 3 mage now." Lucian nodded, but still felt a little strange. He was not surprised that the uncle, whom he had never met before, knew that he was a mage, but that he was a level 3 mage. Since the Magician's Peace Pact was announced 10 years ago, the magicians on the continent were no longer judged by their individual strength. Instead, they were judged by the role they could play in a magic industry and the professional knowledge they had. The so-called Level 3 Magician assessment standard had long been thrown aside by the Magicians Guild, and no magician would use this standard to judge their own level. Moreover, Under the leadership of New Flyer, in a new magic system that had flourished on the continent these years, the traditional rating of mages had long been outdated. It could not accurately describe a mage's ability. For example, with Lucian's current level, he would probably be a level 2 or level 3 mage according to the traditional rating, because he rarely studied those destructive spells. However, with the new magic theory education he received in Philip Academy, his understanding and mastery of magic were far beyond those traditional mages. As long as he was willing, his combat power would not be worse than a level 5 or even level 6 mage. It was just that things like battle prowess were very boring to the mages on the continent, so not many mages would seriously study it. After all, under the restrictions of the Peace Pact of Mages, mages could not participate in wars, so naturally, they could not show their destructive power. Moreover, even if they did participate in wars, in the face of all kinds of powerful military magic machines, the individual strength of a mage was simply not enough to be of much use. As for the traditional choice of joining a merchant guild as a guard, it had long been replaced by all kinds of guards equipped with light military magic machines, so mages had nothing to do with it. Moreover, rather than joining a merchant guild as a guard, it was better to join a merchant guild as a researcher or engage in other related magic research work. The money earned was more than being a guard, and it was easier, and there was no danger to one's life. In short, it was very rare to see someone like this uncle, who used the title Level 3 Mage to introduce himself. At the very least, it was the first time Lucian had met someone like this. What? You're not familiar with the concept of a Level 3 Mage? The uncle seemed to have seen through Lucian's thoughts and laughed. Young mages like you are definitely not familiar with it. Lucian forced a smile, not knowing how to respond. Fortunately, the boss walked back at this moment and handed the change to the uncle, alleviating the awkward atmosphere. The uncle took the money, stood up, and waved at Lucian. Let's go. Lucian was surprised as he looked at the uncle in confusion. The uncle said with a smile, "Didn't you have all your money stolen by a thief? You don't seem like a local, so how are you planning to live?" Lucian gritted his teeth. "I would try to find a short job to earn some money for my journey back. So it's a good thing I have a short job that requires some magic knowledge. For 3 days, 1 gold coin a day. If you're willing, then you can leave." Lucian hesitated a bit before gritting his teeth and standing up. The uncle smiled at Lucian and said in a serious manner, "Young man, it's fine to have difficulties for now. There will always be a way to solve it." Lucian gave an unsound. After following him for a bit, he couldn't help curiously asking, "Uncle, can I ask what kind of job it is?" "That's right. I haven't asked for your name yet. You can just call me Rondo." As for the job, I opened a small workshop and recently received a job. It's to make a batch of magic fans for a factory, so I need to recruit some magic array workers to help me. You have no problem drawing the primary grade 1 magic array, right? The uncle suddenly asked. No problem. This magic array is rather simple." "Then it's fine." Uncle Rondo nodded. "The other side was in a rush, so I wanted to recruit some temporary workers in the city, but I bumped into you when I was eating. You don't need to thank me. If you can help me finish this batch of goods and don't delay, I should be the one thanking you." Lucian quickly waved his hand. No. Not only did you pay for my meal, you also gave me a job. No matter what, I should be the one thanking you." Uncle Rondo revealed a faint smile and didn't argue with Lucian about this. He brought him out of the noodle shop and turned a corner, arriving at a bus stop before getting into a magic car. The bus drove out of Doral City, and when it was several kilometers out of the city, it stopped at a small stop on the side of the road. Uncle Rondo brought Lucian out of the bus and walked along the road for a bit before a small manor appeared in front of them. "We're here." Lucian looked at the somewhat old manor in front of him and felt strange. Why did Uncle Rondo open his small workshop here? This place was this far from Doral City, and it wasn't in the industrial area outside Doral City. Whether it was transporting parts or finished products, it was very inconvenient, so it clearly wasn't a suitable location. "This is a small manor that my ancestors left me. To find such a large piece of land in the industrial area in the city, it would take quite a bit of money. Perhaps seeing the doubt in Lucian's eyes, Uncle Rondo explained. Oh, Lucian gave an understanding sound before following Uncle Rondo to the entrance of the manor. There were 2 guards at the entrance of the manor. Seeing the 2 of them come over, they revealed a grin to Uncle Rondo before waving their hands to let them in. After entering the manor, Lucian looked at the ruined manor and his heart filled with even more doubt. Since this was Uncle Rondo's small workshop, he should at least hear the sound of the magic machines working, right? At least. The manor shouldn't be covered in a thick layer of dust and even of cobwebs all over, right? After taking 2 steps, Lucian suddenly felt a bit of vigilance and stopped. Uncle Rondo, I suddenly thought of something, so I can't do this job anymore. As for the money I owe you, I promise I'll return it to you in the future, Lucian said in a hesitant voice. Uncle Rondo took a deep look at Lucian, and the gentle smile on his face gradually disappeared. What replaced it was a strange smile that made Lucian's heart turn cold. What? You owe me 15 silver coins, and you want to leave like this? How could that be? Lucian couldn't help taking a step back. Uncle Rondo suddenly raised his hand, and Lucian immediately felt a strange magic wave reverberating around him. Magic fluctuation interference? Lucian was shocked. Just as he was about to mobilize the mana within his body to stabilize the mana space around him, 2 burly men suddenly appeared out of nowhere. One of the large men hit the back of Lucian's neck, and his vision turned dark as he fainted. Chapter 1150. Lucian woke up from the intense shaking. When he opened his eyes, he found that it was pitch black. Lucian was in a daze for a while, before gradually remembering what had happened before he fainted. He had followed Uncle Londo to the small manor outside Doral City. He had been planning on accepting Uncle Londo's invitation to do some work and earn some money, but he had been knocked unconscious by a man who had suddenly appeared. No matter how ignorant Lucian was, he knew that he had fallen into a trap. That kind-looking Uncle Londo wasn't a good person. Even when he took the initiative to help her out, it was only to make her lower her guard and increase her trust in him. Thinking of this, Lucian's lips curled into a bitter smile. Before setting off, there were many people who advised him not to come to Doral City alone. There were all kinds of people here, and it was easy for a student like him who had just left school to be deceived. But he thought that he was just a poor student and that other people wouldn't be able to trick him, so they wouldn't target him. As long as he was careful, there shouldn't be any problems. But the facts now told Lucian that he had been too naive. First a thief stole his remaining bit of money, and then he was cheated of it by someone else. Now he was in the hands of someone else. Wait a minute. Lucian knit his brows as doubt filled his heart. Based on the constant vibrations and gwong, gwong, gwong metal colliding sounds coming from under him, it could be inferred that he should be in a magic car that was moving at high speeds, currently driving on an uneven road. Then, based on this situation, it was very likely that he had been kidnapped. But this was what Lucian didn't understand. Why would they kidnap him? He was just a poor student, his family didn't have much money, and he didn't have anything that people liked. What benefits did kidnapping him have? Even if it was those legendary human traffickers, they wouldn't like him who didn't have any meat on him, not to mention a young and beautiful child from the countryside, right? There was a trace of fear that appeared in Lucian's heart. Based on the current situation, he was being transported to another place by the kidnappers, and it was hard to know where he would appear next. If he allowed this to continue, he might not be able to see his family and friends again. Lucian took a deep breath. The turbid air rushed into his nostrils, causing him to cough loudly. However, it also allowed him to regain some of his composure. After moving his body and realizing that he was not tied up, Lucian groped around with his hands and propped himself up. At this time, his eyes had gradually adapted to the surrounding darkness. With the light that came from who knows where, he found that there were some figures around him. There shouldn't be much space in the trunk of a large transport magic car. Lucian thought for a moment and raised his right hand, mana circulating within his body. A faint light shone on the tip of his index finger. In the blink of an eye, it was like a candle being swept away by a gust of wind. It flickered for a moment before it was extinguished. Lucian was stunned and once again condensed the mana in his body. However, the situation this time was no different from before. The light only appeared for a moment before disappearing. Lucian found it very strange. He didn't believe it and condensed his mana a few more times, but the result was the same every time. After a few tries, a slightly tired voice sounded. "All right, don't waste your energy. There's already a magic forbidding domain array in this car. Otherwise, do you think it can trap all of us magicians?" Lucian looked in the direction of the voice and saw a blurred figure. "You're also a magician?" "What do you mean I'm also a magician? Everyone here is." A laugh came from the corner. "Otherwise, why do you think those fellows caught a group of normal people?" Lucian could hear that this person's voice was very young, which made it even more strange. "You're also a student? You're also a student?" That person asked back. "I'm from Phillips Academy. I'm graduating this year." Lucian replied. That person was silent for a bit before suddenly laughing. "You're so casual about your background. It's no wonder you were tricked so easily." Lucian knit his brows. "Weren't you tricked as well?" That person was completely silent this time and didn't say anything else. Lucian also had no interest in bickering with that person. He searched his body and found that apart from the clothes he was wearing, everything else had been taken away. This didn't surprise him. After thinking for a while, he once again concentrated on mobilizing the magic power in his body. This time, he didn't try to mobilize the magic elements to create an illumination spell like before, but carefully probed with his magic power and began to sense the flow of magic elements in the surrounding space. After carefully sensing, he immediately found that the surrounding magic power space was indeed not in a normal state. The flow of magic elements in the space was obviously restricted in a special way, so much so that it was almost stagnant. Naturally, it was very difficult to mobilize and condense them to form magic. This should be the effect of the magic forbidding domain array that person mentioned just now. This kind of thing was a very common application that restricted magicians' ability. Ordinary magicians simply couldn't use their magic power to condense magic elements to form magic in such an environment, so naturally they were not much different from ordinary people. But after Lucian closed his eyes and seriously sensed for a while, he stretched out a finger and drew on the ground. A bit of light seeped out from the line he drew with his magic power, and then was annihilated. Suddenly, there was a sneer in the corner, as if mocking Lucian for overestimating himself. But Lucian didn't care, and once again persisted in condensing his magic power, and drew another line on the ground. As a bit of light lit up and then extinguished in the dim carriage, Lucian had drawn a magic array consisting of many lines on the ground in a short while. After finishing these preparations, Lucian placed his hand on the magic array, and while infiltrating the magic power in his body into this magic array, he carefully adjusted the vibration frequency of the magic power and made slight adjustments to the magic array. The flickering light on the magic array was still flickering at first, but after a while, it gradually stabilized and finally lit up a stable, bright, but not dazzling light, completely illuminating the originally dark carriage. Lucian continued to pour his magic power into the magic array, then raised his head and looked around with the help of the light, and saw many young faces looking at him with astonishment. The carriage wasn't big, but as far as the eye could see, there were no less than 20 people squeezed inside, and all of them were young people about the same age as Lucian. Among them, there were both men and women, but there were more men. Lucian looked around at the faces of the people around him, and then asked loudly, "Are you all mages?" This question stunned everyone, and then a young boy nodded in response. "I am a student of Carmen Academy. Did you just say that you are from Philip Academy?" The boy looked Lucian up and down, and his expression was somewhat puzzled. "When did Philip Academy become so strong?" "Yes, you can actually break this anti-magic domain array." A young girl with a round face came over curiously and lowered her head to look at the magic array Lucian had drawn. After thinking for a moment, she shook her head. "I don't understand. How did you do it?" "It's nothing. I just adjusted the vibration frequency of the magic power to more or less the same wavelength of the surrounding magic elements, and then used the principle of resonance to forcibly draw this magic array. This effect can't be maintained for long, and it can't be said that I broke this anti-magic domain array. That's still very impressive. The girl looked at Lucian in amazement. You look to be about the same age as me, but you can actually adjust the vibration frequency of the magic power at will. Even the most outstanding seniors in our academy find it difficult to do so. Lucian smiled and wanted to say that it should be because the overall strength of the academy was too weak. In Philip Academy, Lucian's ability to precisely control magic power wasn't even in the top 10 of the grade. Hey, you said that you can't break this anti-magic domain array? Another boy was concerned about a more practical problem. Since you can draw this magic array, then you can break it, right? If you can, we might be able to escape from this carriage. Hearing this, everyone's eyes focused on Lucian. Yes, if we are transported to an unknown place like this, it will be over. That's right, think of a way. As long as you can break this anti-magic domain array, every one of us here will be able to fly away. Quickly give it a try. Lucian smiled bitterly and waved his hand. Anti-magic domain arrays are currently one of the most complicated research subjects. How can I be so powerful that I can break it so easily? It won't hurt to give it a try. That's right, you can clearly draw this magic array. You must try it before we reach the place, or else you won't have a chance. Lucian wanted to refuse, but a boy in the corner suddenly got up and strode over, slapping the magic array Lucian had drawn. Stop talking nonsense. Everyone wants you to give it a try. So, just give it a try. In any case, none of us can do it. You won't lose anything by trying. Lucian recognized this voice as the one who had spoken to him first. He froze for a moment and wanted to say something, but that person pushed him hard, and his left hand, which had been pressing on the magic array, was immediately forced away. Lucian was about to speak, but he discovered that the magic array's flickering light only fanned twice before stabilizing. Looking at the boy's right hand that was pressing on the magic array, Lucian was greatly surprised. This guy could so easily activate the magic array Lucian had drawn himself. It was enough to prove that his understanding of magic arrays and magic had reached a certain level, not much weaker than Lucian's. Seeing that he had maintained the illumination of the magic array, Lucian muttered to himself for a moment before walking to the side of the carriage under everyone's gazes. He stretched out his hand and pressed on the sealed carriage wall. Lucian frowned when he sensed it with his mana. Chapter 1151. The so-called Magic Forbidden Domain Array was actually to make the magic elemental energy in a magic space abnormal. It made it so that magicians couldn't use their magic to influence and control the magic elemental energy, so naturally, they couldn't use magic. To break this effect, there were two methods. The first method was to obtain the data on the Magic Forbidden Domain Array, especially the data on the magic space affected. Then they could change the way they used their magic and gain the ability to control the magic elemental energy again. This method was similar to the method Lucian had used to draw the magic array, but Lucian's method was a bit trickier, so it was far from truly breaking it. The second method was purely physical destruction. It was to directly destroy the item on which the Magic Forbidden Domain Array was drawn, which would naturally destroy the effects of the Magic Forbidden Domain Array. With the current environment Lucian's group was in, this Magic Forbidden Domain Array could only be drawn in the magic car under their feet. But when Lucian's hand touched the walls of the car, he immediately felt another kind of magic interference. He quickly analyzed that whether it was the walls of the car he was touching or the floor he was standing on, there was an additional strengthening magic array. The use of this strengthening magic array was very simple. It was to strengthen the item, making it hard for it to change shape. So if he wanted to destroy the car they were in, he had to break this strengthening magic array first. However, when Lucian gave it a try, he found that the finesse of this strengthening magic array far surpassed his imagination. It wasn't at a level that he could understand right now. It's very clear that the other side is very prepared, so they dare to let us move freely in the car. Lucian gave a sigh and told the results of his investigation to the others in the car. The people in the car weren't surprised by his answer, but they were a bit disappointed. They were the same as Lucian. They were all students of the various magic machine industrial schools of the Canla Empire. They could be considered decent magicians, so naturally it was easy for them to investigate this situation. They had encouraged Lucian to give it a try, because they saw that he could create a magic array in this environment. So they had a bit of expectation for him. Now that Lucian had expressed that he had no other choice, although everyone was disappointed, they understood that Lucian was only a student about the same age as them. Even if he was stronger than them in some aspects, it couldn't be by much. The boy who was helping Lucian to maintain the illumination circle let out a long sigh and let go of his hand. The carriage returned to darkness. Everyone's hearts sank into darkness along with the carriage. Lucian naturally wasn't willing to give up, but no matter how he probed, he still couldn't think of any way to resolve the current predicament. In the end, he was just a student who was about to graduate from the academy. Even if his results in the academy were considered outstanding, his experience, knowledge, and ability were still limited. How could he possibly deal with such a situation? The bumps in the carriage continued, which meant that the magic car carrying them was quickly heading to their destination. In the darkness, it was unknown how much time passed before the magic car slowly came to a stop after a few bumps. Everyone in the dark looked at each other, knowing that they had reached their destination. After some faint sounds of conversation came from outside, the back door of the carriage was suddenly pulled open. The strong sunlight suddenly shone in, and the people in the carriage who hadn't seen light for a long time couldn't help but close their eyes. "All right, all of you come down." A rough voice rang out. A rough voice came from inside. "I'm warning you, don't have any bad ideas or you'll suffer." Lucian narrowed his eyes and tried hard to look outside. He saw two large men guarding the back door of the carriage, and there were several roofs outside, so he didn't know where they were. "Stop pretending to be dead. Quickly get up. Time is tight for these masters." The two large men impatiently knocked on the door of the carriage. The loud noise buzzed in the carriage, and everyone couldn't help but cover their ears. Lucian glanced at the two burly men. Just as he was about to make a move, a black shadow that had been hiding in the corner of the door suddenly rushed out. It jumped directly into the air and paused, as if it was about to fly. However, his body only paused in the air for a moment. Then, as if he had lost all support, he fell from the air with a bang and landed directly on the ground. The two large men were stunned before reacting. Looking at the person who couldn't move from the pain on the ground, they broke out in laughter. "Huh, kid, you want to escape after coming here? Don't dream. Let me tell you, this entire place is covered with an anti-magic field array. Not to mention a bunch of kids like you. Even a great mage wouldn't be able to escape." Lucian's expression changed slightly. When Londo introduced himself, he used the title of Level 3 Magician, and the two large men were now using the title of Great Mage. This was a ranking system that had been abandoned by the signs. Why were they still using it? Was there a connection between them? After the two large men mocked him, one of them reached out and grabbed the person on the ground by the hair and lifted him up. Lucian was slightly shocked. The person who suddenly rushed out and tried to escape was the boy who had taken the initiative to talk to him and later helped him maintain the magic array. The large man who grabbed him didn't say anything and punched him hard in the stomach. The large man's punch was very strong. The boy's body wasn't very strong either and was immediately bent over by the punch, spitting out a mouthful of blood. When the two burly men saw this, they laughed proudly. "Hey, you bunch of magician brats. If it was in the past, us brothers would have been afraid of you, but now, you're just trash without any strength." The other large man waved at the people in the carriage. "Do you see that? Come down obediently, or you'll end up like him." The people in the carriage looked at each other and helplessly jumped down one by one. Every time someone jumped down, the large man would take out a pair of handcuffs to bind their hands, obviously not giving them any freedom. When it was Lucian's turn, he didn't resist and obediently reached out his hands to be bound by the handcuffs. When the handcuffs were on him, he clearly felt a magical wave coming from the handcuffs. Then he immediately found that the flow of magic in his body was greatly disrupted, to the extent that it became very jerky. He even completely lost the ability to control the magic in his body. Lucian was astonished. Interfering with a magician's magic. This was a new research topic that had just arisen in the science magic circle in the past 2 years. But the people in front of him had already made a corresponding product. With the special magic car that they used to transport them, as well as the large-scale magic forbidden domain array, it could be seen that the power behind them was very strong. But until now, Lucian still couldn't figure out why they kidnapped his students. But the two large men clearly weren't interested in explaining. After putting the handcuffs on everyone, they pushed them deeper into the manor they were currently in. After taking a few steps, the two girls in the group suddenly broke out in tears. We're not going. I beg you. I beg you to let us go, all right? I don't want to go. I want to go back to see my mother. Hearing the cries of the two girls, the rest of the boys, including Lucian, turned their heads away, not daring to meet the eyes of the two girls who were begging for help. They were just ordinary students. Under such circumstances, what could they use to fight against these enemies who were obviously well-organized and had a deep background? The two large men were clearly used to this scene, so they forcefully pushed the two crying girls away. They laughed as they said, "All right, we're not selling you to a brothel. What are you crying for? That's right, we're just doing illegal work. Relax, buyers like you treasure you, so we won't do anything to you. Of course, that is on the premise that you're obedient. If you're not obedient," Lucian's heart skipped a beat. Illegal work. Could it be that this group of people were members of the evil organization that had emerged in recent years and sold low-level magicians as laborers? This organization was said to be very strict, so if they fell into their hands, it would be hard for them to see the light of day again. The surrounding people had clearly heard of this rumor before, so their expressions all changed and they became restless. However, the two large men didn't hesitate to kick and punch them, not showing any mercy at all. They immediately suppressed the restlessness. "Bah, I already told you, as long as you were obedient, it would be fine. You just had to cause some trouble, so we had to do it ourselves." One of the large men spat on his fist, which he had just punched, and rubbed it hard. "I'm warning you, if you dilly-dally again, I won't be so gentle next time." The group of people stammered, but no one dared to resist, so they could only follow the two large men and continue to walk forward. Lucian looked at the entrance of the manor in the distance, and his heart gradually sank. He knew that if he walked in, it would mean that he would become an illegal worker, never to see the light of day again. Not to mention entering the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce of his dreams. Even returning to his hometown and seeing his parents again would be an extravagant hope. What to do? At this moment, a clear and melodious voice that sounded full of vitality suddenly rang out. "Hey, the game is over." Chapter 1152. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice in shock. They saw a girl in the group slowly raise her head and meet everyone's gaze. This girl didn't do anything special before and always kept her head down, so she didn't attract much attention. Now that she suddenly said such a sentence, everyone was very surprised. "Why are you looking at me? I said the game is over. Everyone can go back." The girl's voice sounded very playful, but her expression didn't change at all, which made people feel very strange. The two strong men looked at each other, and one of them strode over and roared, "Hey, little girl, what are you talking about? Are you asking for a beating?" The girl tilted her head and looked at the strong man. She still didn't change her expression and let out a playful laugh. A fireball suddenly flew out from her raised hands and directly sent the strong man flying. The other strong man stared blankly at his companion, who was sent flying. After a while, he reacted and shouted in shock, "Impossible! How are you still able to use magic? Is such a flawed magic array worthy of being called an anti-magic field array? The girl's voice revealed undisguised disdain. "It's not as strong as the anti-magic field array in the maze I played in when I was a child." The strong man raised his fist. It looked like he wanted to rush up and beat the girl, but he didn't dare. The girl pointed behind him. "Hey, don't you want to see your companion? If you don't do something, he will be burned to death." The strong man looked back in shock and saw that his companion, who was sent flying by the girl's fireball, was now covered in flames. He was rolling on the ground and screaming in pain. He quickly took off his clothes and patted them hard. However, the flames on his companion's body didn't weaken at all. He could only glare at the girl and run into the depths of the manor. The rest of the young people, including Lucian, stared blankly at the strong man who was still rolling on the ground and screaming, and then looked at the girl who still had a wooden expression on her face. For a moment, they didn't know how to react. "Okay, let me help you remove these handcuffs first." The girl suddenly seemed to think of something. She clapped her hands lightly, and the handcuffs that were originally cuffing her hands automatically fell off. Lucian was startled. After putting on the handcuffs earlier, he had secretly made many attempts to remove the influence of the handcuffs on his own mana before finding a way to remove the restrictions on the handcuffs. However, the design of the magic device in the handcuffs was obviously very delicate. Under the influence of the handcuffs, he couldn't even gather his own magic power, let alone remove the handcuffs. But now, this girl didn't seem to do anything, and she easily removed the handcuffs. It was enough to show that her understanding and use of magic was far above Lucian's. After removing the handcuffs, the girl shook her wrists and walked to the others. She gently tapped on the handcuffs that locked them, and the handcuffs automatically loosened. When it was Lucian's turn, Lucian focused his mind and sensed a strange magic fluctuation coming from the girl's finger. Then the magic fluctuation in the handcuffs that could affect his magic control instantly disappeared without a trace. At the same time, this strange magic separated and probed into the handcuffs, affecting the mechanical device inside the handcuffs and causing the handcuffs to automatically loosen. Lucian looked at the handcuffs on the ground, and then at the girl who was helping the next person remove the handcuffs, and his heart was full of amazement. This girl looked to be about the same age as him. But not only was she able to use magic as usual in this environment enveloped by the anti-magic domain array, but she was also able to easily remove the exquisitely designed and precise magic handcuffs. It was really incredible. But what puzzled Lucian the most was why such an outstanding girl would be captured by those people and brought here. With her ability, she shouldn't have fallen into such a trap. "Hey, everyone, let's run." That guy must have called for help. A boy who had just been freed from the handcuffs yelled anxiously. The others looked at each other with worried expressions. It was obvious that the burly man had gone straight into the depths of the manor to call for help. If they continued to stay here, they would only be captured again. "I don't recommend that you do that." The girl who rescued the boy let out a chuckle and waved her hand at everyone. "With your ability, you won't be able to run far at all. And this place is very remote. Even if you leave this place, I'm afraid it will be very difficult to find your way home." Everyone looked at each other. Another girl on the team couldn't help but ask, "Then what do we do? When their helpers come, won't we still be captured?" The girl who rescued the boy shrugged. "Don't worry. They can call for help, but can't I?" After saying that, she flipped her hand and took out a small and exquisite magic communicator from nowhere. Everyone was shocked when they saw her actions. The people here were all students of various academies who studied magic. Of course, they could tell that this girl had taken out this magic communicator from an extra magic space. To be able to have an extra magic space, one must either be wearing the corresponding magic tools or have a strong enough magic power and have a deep understanding of space magic. This girl was definitely like them and didn't have any special items on her. Then, the only explanation was that she was an extremely powerful mage who had a good grasp of space magic. If it was 10 years ago, those who could master space magic would be at least a great mage. Now, although spatial magic was no longer as mysterious and difficult to understand as it used to be after 10 years of research and development in modern magic theory, Those who could understand it well and master it well, and even create a portable storage space were all elites among mages. Any mage who had this ability would be able to obtain a high-level evaluation in space magic theory. They would even have the qualifications to enter the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce to conduct research. While they were doubtful that this girl had such a powerful ability at such a young age, everyone's hearts calmed down. With such a powerful magician here, they might really have hope of being saved. However, in the next moment, everyone's expressions changed. There was a rumbling sound that came from the depths of the manor. Looking over, there were 3 fierce-looking magic cars that were wildly charging over. Magic cars. These young people who had been studying magic machines for a long time, which one of them couldn't recognize that these were the magic cars that had terrified countless people on the battlefield. In front of these terrifying military magic machines, just based on these young magicians, not to mention the magic suppression domain, even if they were in their peak condition, they definitely wouldn't be able to fight them. Even if it was a powerful, great magician, they wouldn't be able to do anything when facing these magic cars. This was because the new flyer had already fought the 2 empires 10 years ago, as well as some of the recent disputes on the continent. Everyone couldn't help looking at that strange girl again. No matter how strong she was, it was impossible for her to fight 3 magic cars by herself. Then, what about the helper she mentioned? The girl saw everyone looking at her and gave a shrug. It's just 3 old magic cars that have already been eliminated. What are you all so nervous for? Everyone looked at each other in blank dismay. Another girl couldn't help saying in an anxious voice, Classmate, those are magic cars. We definitely can't beat them. Hurry up and call your helpers. Right. We'll be dead if we're late. Quickly, I don't want to be caught by them again. The group of people urged one after another. The girl had no expression, but she gave a sigh and shook her head. You all really aren't calm enough. Although she said this, she still picked up the magic communicator in her hand and softly pressed it. However, in front of everyone's expectant gazes, the light on the magic communicator kept flashing, and there was no sign of it connecting at all. What is going on? Could it be that it's broken? It can't be that you don't have any helpers and were just lying to us, right? Is there a mistake? What kind of joke is this? God above, I beg you to save us. The hope that the group of youths had was about to be extinguished, and they couldn't help panicking. The girl glanced at the magic communicator in her hand and shook it vigorously. Strange. Could it be that it's broken? It can't be. Everyone looked at her with tearful faces, thinking that they might have been played by this fellow this time. At this time, the boy who had been the first to talk to Lucian and was also the first to rush out of the carriage to escape, but was beaten up, said to the girl in a deep voice, Hurry up and run before they arrive. Since you have the ability to release fireballs here, you should have the ability to escape. As long as you escape and inform the others, we'll have a chance to be saved. Everyone was stunned, thinking that this wasn't a bad idea. However, thinking that only this girl had a chance to escape, there were quite a few people who weren't willing, and their expressions became strange. Lucian didn't pay attention to this from the beginning. He had been staring at the magic communicator in the girl's hand the entire time, knitting his brows in thought. Hearing the boy's words, an idea flashed in his mind. He walked over and reached his hand out to the girl. Can you let me see the magic communicator? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.